Chapter 4092. At that moment, Sydney could no longer control her emotions. She threw herself into Lin Yi's arms and started to cry. For the past 6 months, she had been trying to find out about Lin Yi. However, no matter what method she used, there was no news at all. No one knew who Lin Yi was. Unexpectedly, just as she was about to lose all hope, the lover that she had been yearning for day and night had appeared. Finally, she could feel the warmth of his embrace again. Fate had played a cruel joke on her. However, at least, it had not completely abandoned her. Sydney's reaction caught Lin Yi off guard. He did not know what she had been through in the past 6 months. However, as a man, what he needed to do was to hug her quietly and let her vent all of her grievances. As he gently stroked Sydney's skinny back, Lin Yi was slightly surprised. In his memory, Sydney's figure was quite voluptuous. In the end, after not seeing her for a few months, she had become so skinny. The bitterness in this made his heart ache. Buried in Lin Yi's arms, Sydney cried for a long time. Finally, she gradually recovered. She looked up at Lin Yi with her tear-stained face. It was an enchanting sight. "All right, Sydney, tell me. What happened to you in the past 6 months? How did you lose so much weight?" Lin Yi could not help but ask. Sydney nodded obediently. She immediately began to tell Lin Yi everything. She was full of grievances and she needed someone to listen to her. At the same time, Qian, who was monitoring the room through her MP4, was overjoyed when she saw the two of them hugging each other tightly. Although she could only see the image and could not hear what the two of them were talking about, she felt that it was enough. Everything went according to her plan. After drugging Ling Qin, he could just let him go in and push Sydney down. In any case, she could say that he was Sydney's lover. Regardless of whether Senior Marshal Brother Wei believed her or not, the rice had already been cooked. He could only kill this adulterous couple to vent his anger. However, none of this had anything to do with Qian. She could just say that her lover had snuck in on his own and that she had only found out about it after watching the surveillance footage. However, the scene before her eyes had completely exceeded her expectations. The two of them actually hugged each other and whispered sweet nothings to each other as soon as they entered the door. There was no trace of coercion at all. Now, there was even foreplay. It was simply too perfect and realistic. "Just as I expected, this bitch looks like she's as pure as ice and as clean as jade, but she's actually a slut. She even wants this kind of unbearably vulgar wild man. She's really coquettish to a certain level. You actually dared to snatch Senior Brother Wei from me. Bitch wants to have such a good life." Qian cursed with a smug look on her face. From her angle, she could not see that Sydney was crying. She could only see the two of them hugging each other tightly. Therefore, it did not matter whether the two of them did it or not. Just this scene alone was enough to prove that Sydney had a wild man outside. Senior Marshal Brother Wei would definitely not want this kind of dirty bitch. Her plan had succeeded. Furthermore, it was unexpectedly smooth. Qian could not wait any longer and immediately asked someone to call Xiao Qiuhua back. Soon, the next step could be started. In the closed bedroom, Lin Yi quietly listened to Sydney's tragic experience. Even he felt wronged for Sydney. He gritted his teeth and said, "This Sydney is really not a good person. However, since I'm here now, you don't have to be afraid anymore. I'll definitely avenge you 100 times, 1,000 times." "Okay." Sydney nodded happily. However, she then said worriedly, she is now a foundation-building full-cycle expert. She is not someone we can fight against. Let's wait and see. Being able to see Lin Yi again today made her very happy. She did not want Lin Yi to lose his life in a moment of impulse. That would turn a comedy into a tragedy. We don't have to wait for too long. However, we do need to find a suitable opportunity. Lin Yi shook his head. He had the ability to kill City Qian. The biggest problem was that he was unfamiliar with the place. What should he do after killing her? He could only figure out the situation first. Oh right, Sydney, you are still at Heaven Stage full cycle. Have you not broken through to Foundation Building? Lin Yi asked. No. In the past half a year, I have not even seen a method to break through to Foundation Building. I also do not have any cultivation resources, let alone trying to break through to Foundation Building, Sydney said helplessly. Lin Yi could not help but feel distressed. Even people like Xiao Ran and Xiao Hongkai who followed him were already in the early stage of Foundation Building. Sydney was the leader of the Snow Valley. In terms of talent and foundation, she was much stronger than these people. However, she had not broken through to Foundation Building. Fate was unpredictable. Fortunately, for the current Lin Yi, getting some Foundation Building pills to help Sydney break through to Foundation Building was a very simple task. As long as Sydney was in the right state, she could try it at any time. Sydney, I can. Lin Yi was about to tell her about it, but when he looked down, he found that Sydney had already fallen asleep in his arms. She was sleeping very soundly. Ever since she came to Heaven Stage Island, she had never slept so peacefully. Sleep well, have a sweet dream, I'll take you away from here when you wake up tomorrow. Lin Yi patted Xueli's back gently and pulled her into his arms, snuggling against each other. On the other side, although City Qian did not see the two's next move, she could not hold back anymore. After little Qiuhua came back, she immediately asked her to bring the video to Senior Brother Wei so that he could enjoy the show. After an hour, Senior Brother Wei rushed over angrily. When he saw City Qian, his first sentence was full of killing intent. Where is that shameless couple? I am going to kill them. Senior Brother Wei, don't be angry. It is not worth it to hurt your body because of this bitch. I will take you to her. City Qian was very proud of herself. While leading the way, she said, I told you that this bitch has a lover outside. Senior Brother Wei, you didn't believe me at first. Fortunately, we caught you in the act. Otherwise, you would have been tricked by this bitch to become dual cultivation partners. Senior Brother Wei, your reputation will be ruined. You see, I am still the best. Hearing this, Senior Brother Wei's face darkened. He did not say anything, but the killing intent emitted from his body became even stronger. Chapter 4093. In his eyes, Xueli was like a fairy who had descended to the mortal world. Otherwise, he would not have fallen in love with her at first sight. He did not expect her to be with such a crude and boorish man. This was simply unbearable. If he had not seen the surveillance video, he would not have believed it. But now, the only thought in his mind was to kill this adulterous couple to vent his anger. Bang! The door was kicked into pieces. Senior Brother Wei stepped into the bedroom. Looking at the two who were still hugging each other, he was so angry that his eyes were on fire. He pointed at Sydney and cursed, You bitch, which part of me, Wei Shinjin, is inferior to this boorish man? He looks so boorish. I did not expect a bitch like you to like this. Good, very good. I will kill you both today. Yes, yes, the adulterous couple should be killed. They should be cut into pieces. City Qian fanned the flames. At this moment, Xueli, who was sound asleep in Lin Yi's arms, was awakened. She was startled when she saw Wei Shinjin, who looked like he was going to eat someone alive, and shrunk into Lin Yi's arms. As for Lin Yi, he had already noticed Wei Shinjin before he kicked the door. But even if he had noticed it in advance, he could not do anything about it. The only problem he had to think about was how to take Sydney away from here. This guy should not be underestimated. He was an expert in the early stage of the Gold Core realm. Lin Yi was on his guard, but his face was cold. You're sick, aren't you? Sydney and I are in love with each other. We have known each other for a long time. What does it have to do with you that we are together? What did you say? You have been together for a long time. Wei Shenjin was so angry that his eyes widened. He felt that he was being cheated on. All this while, he had been busy preparing for the wedding in order to marry Xueli. He had even let the news out. What was done could not be undone. Little did he expect that Xueli had already had such a wild lover. He was going to be so embarrassed this time. Seeing this, Situ Qian chimed in, Xueli is my maid. She belongs to me, so her marriage is naturally decided by me. You vulgar wild man, you actually dare to clamor in front of senior brother Wei here? Could it be that you think that our snow sword school doesn't have anyone left, that we can be bullied by an ant like you? Lin Yi looked at Situ Qian and smiled coldly at Wei Shenjin. This junior sister of yours is the real bitch. You don't even know how many men have ridden on you before you interfered with me and Xueli's business. You'd better take care of your own family matters first. Don't come out and embarrass yourself and make people laugh their heads off. Hearing this, Wei Shenjin did not react. However, Situ Qian jumped up like a cat whose tail had been stepped on. She pointed at Lin Yi and said, Senior brother Wei, this man dares to insult me. Help me kill him. This adulterous couple, we can't let them walk out of here alive today. Otherwise, Senior brother Wei, you won't be able to face anyone. Situ Qian was a woman who could be ridden by 1,000 men. Lin Yi was right. It was no wonder that she was panicking. It did not matter if Lin Yi had guessed it or not. Just based on this sentence alone, Lin Yi had to die today. No matter what, she was going to kill him to silence him. To prevent future trouble. At this time, there was no need for Situ Qian to instigate. Wei Shenjin had already attacked Lin Yi and Sydney. Just as Situ Qian had said, they could not let this adulterous couple go today. This was not only to vent their anger, but also to cover up their shame. Only by killing them would they be able to put an end to this scandal. As for the marriage that had been rumored before, if things did not work out, they could only ask Situ Qian to take the blame. Anyway, this woman was more than happy to do so. Lin Yi's eyes narrowed slightly. Wei Shenjin was a master in the early phase of the Golden Elixir stage. Any one of his moves was no small matter. If it was just Lin Yi, he wouldn't have to worry. With his current strength, he could even fight with a master in the middle phase of the Golden Elixir stage. Moreover, the opponent was only at the early phase of the Golden Elixir stage. However, the key point was that he had Sydney in his arms. She had the strength of a Heaven Stage exceptional realm. Even a casual brush from a foundation building expert would be seriously injured or even killed, let alone a beginner of the Golden Elixir realm. If they really fought here, Lin Yi could not guarantee the safety of Sydney. If something really happened, even if he could kill them to vent his anger, he would regret it for the rest of his life. Moreover, this was the territory of the Snow Sword faction. If he really killed people here, he would inevitably be wanted by the Snow Sword faction. In the future, it would be difficult for him to move in the Middle Island, and he might not even have a place to hide. Retreat first. Lin Yi made up his mind instantly. Facing the fierce attack of Wei Shenjin, he did not have the slightest intention of fighting him head-on. His body flashed and he was about to rush to Situ Qian. This wild man is quite fast, but he still has to die. Seeing this, Wei Shenjin paused for a moment and then changed his attack. His body flashed and he reached out his hand to block in front of Situ Qian. Although Siti Qian was also a foundation building expert in the peak, and it would not be so easy to sneak attack her, this woman must be lacking in actual combat. If she was not careful, it was very likely that she would be defeated by someone stronger than her. After all, she was the granddaughter of an elder. If she was taken hostage by the opponent, Wei Shenjin would not be able to take action. However, the next moment, Wei Shenjin's face suddenly turned extremely ugly. Lin Yi's action of rushing to Siti Qian was a premeditated fake move. The purpose was to trick Wei Shenjin. Taking advantage of this subtle gap, Lin Yi instantly changed his direction and performed the butterfly subtle steps to the extreme. He carried Sydney on his back and rushed out of the room. He just happened to pass by Wei Shenjin, who was busy protecting Siti Qian. Ah. I am so angry. Watching Lin Yi and Siti Qian rush out of the room, the feeling of being defeated in front of him made Wei Shenjin angry. Relying on the powerful strength of the early stage of the Gold Core realm, he more or less underestimated his opponent. He did not even think that Lin Yi could burst out with such amazing speed in an instant. Even he did not have time to react. Despicable scum, do you think you can escape from my palm like this? I want to see where you can run to. Wei Shenjin immediately followed. He said that he would kill the two of them, so they would definitely die. No matter where they escaped to, they would not be able to live. Chapter 4094. Lin Yi, why don't you put me down? Sydney leaned on Lin Yi's back. She was nervous and embarrassed. No need. He won't let this go. It'll be faster this way. Lin Yi said without turning his head. He performed the butterfly subtle steps with all his strength. Even with a person on his back, he was still much faster than Sydney, who was at the peak of heaven stage. Although the butterfly's subtle steps were very exquisite, Wei Shenjin's figure had already caught up with them in just a moment. Carrying a person on his back had a huge impact on his speed. Moreover, his opponent was an expert at the early stage of the Gold Core realm, and one who was good at lightness skill. Go to hell. Wei Shenjin grinned hideously. His already extremely fast speed suddenly increased. In an instant, he dashed to the back of Lin Yi and Qin Xiaobei. He struck towards them with his palm. He was going to kill them both at once. However, Lin Yi was already prepared for this. He condensed true qi at his fingertips. Without turning his head, he only used divine sense to lock onto his opponent's thigh. Wei Shenjin was caught off guard and hit the target. The finger of power was the martial arts technique that Su Xiaohu used to kill Qin Muzhuan. It was powerful, but not profound. Lin Yi easily mastered and improved it into the finger of power of fire after seeing it once. At this time, it could be put to good use. In the future, he could blame it on Su Xiaohu. Anyway, this person was already dead, and the dead could not testify. By the time these people realized that something was wrong and suspected him, he would have already returned to the North Island. Fuck. A sharp pain came from his thigh. Wei Shenjin's face suddenly turned black. His feet trembled, and then he bumped into a pile of garbage. He watched Lin Yi and Qin Xiaobei run away, but he couldn't get up to catch up. He could only clench his teeth and say, "This insidious bastard. If I had known earlier, I would have killed him with my sword." As a core disciple of the Snow Sword School, Wei Shenjin's real strength was using the sword. However, when he moved his sword, there would be a sign of snow. This was the downtown area of the Heaven Stage Island. Fighting here was clearly prohibited. On top of that, due to his carelessness, he was prepared to deal with Lin Yi and Zhang Xian with his palm. He did not expect that he would be injured instead. "Senior Brother Wei, why are you injured?" Siti Qian, who had caught up from behind, was stunned when she saw Wei Shenjin lying in a pile of garbage. Wei Shinjin was a core disciple that was viewed as a pillar by the higher-ups of the Snow Sword faction. He was a golden core expert. In City Qian's eyes, it would be a piece of cake for him to hunt down Ling Yi and Sydney. Ling Yi had just recovered from his heavy injuries. Moreover, he was carrying a burden like Sydney on his back. Their target was so obvious. It would be a miracle if they could escape from Wei Shinjin. Who would have thought that they would actually fail miserably in such an easy task? It's nothing. I was just careless and was ambushed by him. Wei Shinjin's face suddenly became a little embarrassed and he replied gloomily. City Qian helped him up from the ground doubtfully and asked, "What should we do now? We can't just let that bitch couple escape, right?" City Qian could not help but suspect that Wei Shinjin still had fantasies about that bitch. That was why she had shown mercy just now. Otherwise, the other party would not have been able to escape so easily. But if that was the case, she was in an awkward situation. Wei Shinjin still had feelings for Sydney. If that was the case, how would she be able to become his Dao companion? Furthermore, just now, when Lin Yi scolded her for being ridden by 1,000 men, she was really shocked. Therefore, no matter what, she had to find a way to silence this bitch couple. Only then would she be able to be at ease. Otherwise, if the two of them were to live for another day, it would be a fatal danger. How can we let them go? These bitches must die. Let's go back and report to the sect now. Let's have the entire city arrest them. Let's see where they can run to. Wei Shinjin gritted his teeth and said. When City Qian heard this, she was overjoyed. This was exactly what she wanted. She then asked, yes, we must make it impossible for them to escape. But, what excuse should we use to report to the sect? If they were to directly tell the truth, Wei Shinjin would lose a lot of face. He thought for a while and said, let's say that Sydney eloped with that wild man and before she escaped, she ambushed and injured me. Senior brother is wise. That way, she would be considered to have betrayed the sect. We don't even need to do anything ourselves. The upper echelons will definitely tear this bitch couple into pieces. City Qian praised happily. After the two of them discussed, they immediately acted according to the plan. As expected, the upper echelons of the Snow Sword faction were furious when they found out about the situation. Betraying the sect was the most serious crime in any force. They immediately mobilized the entire sect's power and issued a warrant to the entire city for Lin Yi and Sydney. After all, the Snow Sword faction was able to establish a foothold in Middle Island. Once the Snow Sword faction took action, it was like a thunderbolt. In just a short half an hour, the warrant had already spread all over the city. On the warrant was a rough sketch of the two people's appearance and temperament. The man was named as a rough martial artist and the woman was the Snow Sword faction's handmaiden, Sydney. When they saw that there was a warrant posted in front of them, and it just so happened that the warrant was for the two of them, Lin Yi and Sydney were instantly shocked. They didn't expect the other party to react so quickly. Fortunately, they had been moving in an empty alley and there were no passers-by. Otherwise, their whereabouts would have been exposed long ago. Lin Yi hurriedly stopped with Sydney and retreated to an empty alley. He took off the 1,000 silk mask and revealed his real face. Looking at Lin Yi's familiar face, Sydney's eyes couldn't help but show some affection and tenderness. Although she already knew that the other party was Lin Yi, there was still a big difference between the face of an unfamiliar rough martial artist and the original appearance of Lin Yi. However, there was no time for her to sigh. As expected, the entire city was filled with wanted posters. This made her a little scared and panicky. She looked up at Lin Yi and said guiltily, "Lin Yi, I'm sorry. It's all my fault." "What nonsense are you talking about? You are my little wife. Doesn't that count?" Lin Yi deliberately said with a straight face. Hee hee. You still remember this? Sydney lowered her head blissfully and shyly. On her white cheeks, there was a little more attractive blush. It was like a flower emitting a mature luster. It made people unconsciously fall in love with her. Even Lin Yi's eyes were glued to it. He couldn't help but look at it. That's right. How did your strength become so strong? You can even injure Wei Xinjin of the Gold Core stage. Are you also an expert of the Gold Core stage? Sydney suddenly asked. Chapter 4095. Such an expert would definitely be an official disciple in any top-notch sect. Lin Yi shook his head and explained, that's not it. I'm still at the peak of the late stage of Foundation establishment, but I've always been able to defeat enemies of a higher level. It's not like you don't know about the things in the secular world. Here, it's just the same. Hearing this, Sydney was immediately shocked. Lin Yi's words were said casually, but the meaning behind it was not as simple as that. The secular world and the heavenly island were two completely different levels. A top existence in the secular world like her was just the lowest level of an ant on the heavenly island. The so-called genius also depended on the quality of the gold. A peerless genius in the secular world was nothing on the heavenly island. Such examples could be found everywhere. Perhaps, only a freak like Lin Yi, who could always transcend all the way to the end, could be called a real genius. After being shocked for a long time, Sydney finally came back to her senses. While she was sincerely happy for Lin Yi, she still couldn't help but worry. She gently bit her lips and said, how about, Lin Yi, you go alone first. You're strong and your appearance is different from the wanted poster. No one will come to trouble you. But it's different if you bring me along. It'll be difficult for us to move forward, and it'll be impossible to escape, so in the future, don't say things like letting me go alone first. It's useless even if you say it. Anyway, I won't listen. Listening to these words, Sydney's heart warmed, and a long-lost happiness surged in her heart. Once again, she threw herself into Lin Yi's arms and couldn't help but cry tears of joy. Lin Yi never said words of love, nor did he know how to say such words of love. He didn't even know how to please a woman. However, a reliable and responsible man was enough to kill all the romance and vows of eternal love. Holding Sydney in his arms, Lin Yi said, let's go, let's find a place to stay first. In this situation, it was already a pipe dream to take Sydney to escape from the central island. The only way was to find a safe and reliable place to stay, wait for the storm to pass, and then find a way to leave here. Letting Sydney lie on his back and cover her face, Lin Yi took the lead and walked out of the alley. On the street, all kinds of pedestrians came and went in an endless stream. Almost every 100 feet, there was a special notice board. The notice board was full of various sects, and the wanted posters for Lin Yi and Sydney were naturally included. Fortunately, Lin Yi was now in his original appearance, and Sydney didn't show her face. Thus, for the time being, no one would suspect the two of them. After passing through 2 streets, Lin Yi finally found the place. At first glance, it looked ordinary in front of him. However, it was a 3-story attic with a unique style on this bustling street. It was the destination of his trip, 5 Elements Commerce. When he was in the North Island, Hong Zhong had specially told him that if he was accidentally stranded in the Central Island, he could ask Deputy Shopkeeper Kai of 5 Elements Commerce, which was under the jurisdiction of the Central Island Alchemy Hall, for help. This sentence was just in case, but he didn't expect that it would come in handy under a freak combination of factors. It had even become the only life-saving straw that Lin Yi could grasp at the moment. Lin Yi had never seen this Deputy Shopkeeper Kai before, and he didn't know what kind of person he was. He didn't even know if he would be willing to help him, or if he could help him. But other than that, Lin Yi had no other choice. After all, in this central island, he was unfamiliar with the people and the place. Although Tian Chan was in the Middle Island Alchemy Hall, her status and strength were far from enough to protect the two of them. Before he solved the problem on his body, Lin Yi didn't want her to get involved in anything. As for his cheat master Zhang Liju, who he had never met before, if he could get his recognition, then he could do whatever he wanted. It was a pity that this elixir god was very secretive. Even the people from the Middle Island Alchemy Hall rarely saw him, let alone Lin Yi, who had just arrived. Without a choice, Lin Yi could only place his hope on this deputy shopkeeper Kai. Birds of a feather flocked together, and with Hong Zhong's kind character, a good friend that he respected so much, he shouldn't be someone who would forsake his friends for the sake of profit. Carrying Sydney on his back, Lin Yi didn't hesitate and walked into the Five Elements Commerce. When the worker came to greet him, he said, "Please, I'm looking for Deputy Shopkeeper Kai." The worker looked him up and down and saw that he was carrying a woman on his back. He didn't have any suspicions and nodded. "Oh, you're here to see Deputy Shopkeeper Kai, right? I'll take you there." This Deputy Shopkeeper Kai was Zhang Liju's disciple in name. His medical skills were extremely good, and so there was an endless stream of people coming to see him. It was as if this place had become half a medical center, and the worker was used to it. Although some people complained in private, they didn't dare to show it. Even the real shopkeeper, who was backed by Jing Dongjue, the deputy hall master of Middle Island Elixir Hall, didn't dare to do anything to this deputy shopkeeper Kai. Behind him was Zhang Liju, a super god. Even Jing Dongjue had to bow to him. Messing with him in this Five Elements Commerce was equivalent to looking for death. He followed the worker silently and entered a secluded room on the second floor. The worker told Lin Yi to wait for a while and left. After a while, a middle-aged man who looked to be in his 40s or 50s walked in. Lin Yi didn't know his actual age, but the first impression he gave Lin Yi was that this man had a steady temperament that came from living in the world. This was all the result of time. "Come, have a seat. I am Kai Zhongyang. Are you two here to see a doctor?" The man had a warm smile on his face. A doctor's heart was like a parent's. Although Kai Zhongyang was a businessman, he was still a doctor. He had the heart to save people. If it wasn't for that, he wouldn't have been able to become Zhang Liju's disciple. He couldn't lie in front of a real person, and there were no other people around. Lin Yi said directly, "I'm sorry, I'm not actually here to see a doctor. I have another request." "Oh. What do you mean?" Kai Zhongyang was slightly stunned. As the vice manager of the Five Elements Chamber of Commerce, he very rarely asked about business matters. Instead, he treated more patients and saved more people. Those that came to look for him were all for medical treatment, and there were very few other matters. Chapter 4096. "Ah, it's Hong Zhong." Kai Zhongyang's eyes lit up, and the unfamiliarity between them disappeared instantly. His attitude toward Lin Yi suddenly became warm. "Few people know about my friendship with Hong Zhong. He has always been cautious. Since he told you about this, it means he trusts you very much, young hero Lin. You flatter me, Elder Kai. I've always been under Elder Hong's care. I'm ashamed." Lin Yi was happy. Judging from this person's behavior, his friendship with Hong Zhong should not be shallow, and it was not a simple acquaintance. "Young hero Lin, you're too modest. Hong Zhong is a real businessman. If he can take care of you, it means you can take care of him. It's mutual." Kai Zhongyang knew Hong Zhong well, and his comments were to the point. He laughed and said, "Young hero Lin, how do you know Hong Zhong? This guy has always been in the North Island. He came back a few days ago, and then he ran back to the North Island. I wanted to play chess with him, but I didn't have a chance to play chess with him. To tell you the truth, I'm a disciple of the 3 pavilions in the North Island, and I also met Elder Hong in the North Island. Recently, I came out to do a trial task, but something happened on the way, so I ended up in the Middle Island. Elder Hong asked me to come to 5 Elements Commerce for help, Elder Kai, Lin Yi explained. I see. Well. Hong Zhong has never been polite to me. Who's this lady next to him? Kai Zhongyang turned to ask. Sydney and Lin Yi looked at each other, and she said frankly, I'm Sydney. Nice to meet you, Elder Kai. Sydney? Why does this name sound so familiar? Kai Zhongyang was slightly stunned. Then, he carefully looked at Shueli from head to toe. Then, he suddenly realized something and said, if I'm not mistaken, the person who was wanted by the Snow Sword faction just now, could it be? That's right, it's the 2 of us. Now that things had come to this, it was obviously useless to try to conceal or deny it, so they could only admit it. The only thing that Lin Yi needed to be concerned about now was whether Kai Zhongyang's character was reliable or not. To this, Kai Zhongyang only nodded his head in understanding. He did not have any strange expression, and said to Lin Yi and Li Yundong, you don't have to worry. Since you are friends of that old guy Hong Zhong, then you are also friends of me, Kai Zhongyang. Although the Snow Sword School is not small, it is not something that my 5 Elements Commerce cares about. I'm still a disciple of Grandmaster Zhang Liju. Even if they had 10 guts, they wouldn't dare come here to search. You guys can stay here. Many thanks, Elder Kai. Lin Yi was taken aback for a moment before he hurriedly thanked him along with Sydney. He didn't expect this person to be so loyal and bear the burden for him without saying anything. Moreover, looking at his eyes, it didn't seem fake. But what surprised Lin Yi even more was that he was actually Zhang Liju's disciple. Was that her senior brother or junior brother? Ah, you're too courteous, young Master Lin. This is just a small matter, it's not worth mentioning. Come. This old man will have someone arrange a superior room for you. Both of you don't look too well, so you should take a good rest first. Kai Zhongyang immediately found a superior room for the 2 of them and sent them to their room. I still have something to take care of. You 2 rest first, we'll have dinner together tonight. Lin Yi watched as Kai Zhongyang left. Only then did Lin Yi and Sydney return to their room. Although they were still a little worried, it seemed that this friend that Hong Zhong introduced to them was still reliable. Of course, it wasn't the time to completely relax yet. If what Kai Zhongyang said was true, that he could easily protect the 2 of them, then half of the problem of being wanted by the Snow Sword School would be solved. Just as the 2 of them sat down in the room, they heard a loud noise coming from downstairs. Even with Shueli's strength of heaven level full completion, she could clearly sense what was happening downstairs. Sure enough, the disciples of the Snow Sword faction were here to look for someone. With the wanted poster in hand, the leading disciple of the Snow Sword School looked at the customers and workers of 5 Elements Commerce and said loudly, anyone who knows where these 2 are, as long as you report it, you will be rewarded with 1,000 spirit jades. Has anyone seen them before? The entire crowd quietened down. Although the 5 Elements Chamber of Commerce was the #1 leading chamber of commerce in the Merchant Union, those who came here to purchase pills were not necessarily local tycoons. As long as they made a report, they would be able to obtain 1,000 spirit jades. To most people, this temptation was still very big. However, temptation was one thing. If they didn't have any concrete information, no one would answer. After all, the Snow Sword School wasn't a small sect. Normal people wouldn't have the guts to lie to them. Has no one seen them before? A whole 1,000 spirit jades. There are so many people here, could it be that no one has seen them before? The leading disciple of the Snow Sword School shouted again. At this moment, Kai Zhongyang's voice suddenly came from the top of the stairs. Snow Sword faction is truly awe-inspiring. You even came to my 5 Elements Chamber of Commerce to arrest people. This old man would like to ask, who exactly gave you the courage to openly interfere with my 5 Elements Chamber of Commerce's business? With such a big accusation on them, all the disciples of the Snow Sword School shrunk their necks. The leading disciple was even more shocked. He stammered, "No. No. Vice shopkeeper Kai, please don't be angry. We were just asking casually, are you done asking now? Are you still not going to scram? Or do you want me to send you off personally?" Kai Zhongyang scolded with a cold face. He wouldn't care about this kind of thing normally. However, now that it involved Lin Yi and Su Li, it was a different matter. Yes, yes. We'll scram now. We'll scram now. The disciples of the Snow Sword School nodded and bowed. They didn't even dare to let out a fart. They just left with their tails between their legs. They weren't willing to do this kind of thing in the first place. These top chambers of commerce were all very powerful. Especially a giant like 5 Elements Commerce, which had the support of the Middle Island Pill Hall. They wouldn't care about the Snow Sword School at all. This time, he was just going through the motions to give his master an explanation. Otherwise, he wouldn't have come to ask for trouble. Moreover, they had never thought that they would be able to find someone in a place like 5 Elements Commerce. Naturally, they wouldn't dare and wouldn't go against Kai Zhongyang for this. What happened downstairs was clearly imprinted in Lin Yi's perception. Only then did he finally relax. This friend of Hong Zhong, Kai Zhongyang, was indeed a trustworthy and reliable person. He could finally stay in peace for a short period of time. He didn't need to hide anymore. Chapter 4097. Aw. Now. Sydney couldn't help but be stunned. In the past 6 months, she had been dreaming of breaking through to the Zhuji realm almost every day, but she had never met this condition, let alone had this opportunity. She didn't know how to react to Lin Yi's sudden words. Lin Yi smiled and took out a supreme-grade foundation building pill from his arms, which he had refined for Hong Zhong last time on the northernmost island. At that time, he didn't auction all of them, but kept some for himself. Now he took them out and gave them to Sydney. This is a foundation building pill. Sydney was shocked when she saw it. Although she was only at the peak of the Heaven Stage, she had been on the Heaven Stage island for a long time. She knew what a foundation building pill was, which was an important pill to help people break through to the Zhuji realm. Even the Snow Sword School, a sect on the Middle Island, wouldn't give it to their disciples casually. She didn't expect that Lin Yi would take one out casually, and it seemed to be of the supreme grade. Yes, you can build your foundation as soon as possible after taking it, and you will have more power to protect yourself, so that you won't be bullied by any Tom, Dick or Harry in the future, Lin Yi said with a smile. Well, okay. Sydney had long regarded herself as Lin Yi's woman, so she didn't stand on ceremony and directly took the supreme grade foundation building pill. Her only thought now was that she didn't misjudge him. No matter where this man went, he was destined to be a strong man. He had only been on the Heaven Stage island for more than half a year, and his strength had improved by leaps and bounds to the peak of the late stage of Zhuji realm. What was more exaggerated was that even Wei Xinjin, who was at the early stage of Gold Core, was defeated by him. If this was spread out, it would really shock the world. Of course, what shocked Sydney even more was Lin Yi's connections. He was far away in the North Island, but he had acquaintances in the Middle Island, and it was a top force like 5 Elements Commerce. Moreover, it seemed that his connections were absolutely reliable and wouldn't betray him. This made Sydney feel that It was not without reason that Lin Yi could go from a rogue cultivator in the secular world to an existence that all the ancient sects were afraid of. Perhaps, one day, Lin Yi would also have a place in the Middle Island, where there were so many masters. After adjusting her state, she took the supreme grade foundation building pill. Then, Lin Yi personally taught Sydney how to run the true qi in her body and guided her step by step to break through to the foundation. Xueli was not inferior to the others in terms of foundation and talent. Now, with the help of the supreme grade foundation elixir and Lin Yi's guidance, breaking through to the foundation realm was a piece of cake. There weren't any problems during the process. Yang stage. I Huang T. Lin I T T through by Lin T Huang T I. Yang T T to Chin Huang T since Lin by Lin to Tian to Sei Ming to. The desire to break through to the foundation establishment realm had accumulated in her heart for such a long time. However, in the past half a year, there was no need to talk about success. There was not even the slightest bit of improvement. It had always been so out of reach. Now that he had met Lin Yi, it had only been a day, but he had directly achieved it in one go. Isn't this a little too unbelievable? Of course. You're now a true early-stage foundation establishment expert. However, things are going to be a bit troublesome from now on. Lin Yi smiled. He furrowed his brows slightly. Ah. What happened? Sydney's heart immediately tightened. She thought that something had gone wrong in the process of breaking through to the foundation establishment stage. There were repercussions. Do you have the rest of the mantra for Snow Valley? Lin Yi asked. No. Sydney was stunned. Me neither. Lin Yi shrugged helplessly and said worriedly, so the problem now is that you've become an early-stage foundation establishment expert, but there's no way for you to continue cultivating. This. Sydney finally recovered from the joy of breaking through to the foundation establishment stage. She realized her awkward situation and didn't know what to do for a while. Although it was beautiful to break through to the foundation establishment stage, the strength of the early stage foundation establishment stage was not enough in the heavenly stage island, especially in the middle island. She still couldn't escape the fate of being cannon fodder. The rest of the mantra was a crucial problem. There was no room for carelessness. Sydney had just succeeded in building her foundation and had not stabilized yet. If she couldn't cultivate for a long time, not only would she not be able to improve further, her strength might even fall back to the heavenly stage realm. Then, she would be wasted. Actually, it's not that there's no way. Although the cultivation mantra is treasured by the big sects, as long as you go out and look for it, you should be able to buy it. The biggest problem now is that the mantra you buy might not be suitable for you to cultivate. Lin Yi analyzed. Since he did not have the original Shuegu follow-up cultivation method, then he could only find other cultivation methods to continue cultivating. However, the cultivation methods had always been different from each other. Once the follow-up cultivation method conflicted with the original cultivation method, the lightest consequence would be qigong deviation, and the worst consequence would be death on the spot. Other than some special reasons, there were very few people in the cultivation world who would change their cultivation mantra midway. It was also because of this consideration. Sydney thought for a while and said, actually, when I first came here, the big sects in the Middle Island did a constitution and mantra test for us, the experts in the secular world. They said that I was born with a body of ice, which was very compatible with the Snow Sword faction's mantra. That was why I was brought to the Snow Sword faction. In the past half a year, the reason why Sydney always had high hopes for the Snow Sword faction was because of this. As long as she could cultivate the Snow Sword faction's mantra like the normal disciples, even if it was the most basic, she believed that she would not be any worse than the others. However, she didn't expect that fate would make a fool out of her. After becoming Situ Qian's maid, she didn't even have the chance to cultivate normally, let alone the Snow Sword faction's mantra. In that case, we just need to find a way to get the Snow Sword faction's mantra, right? Lin Yi's eyes brightened. Sydney nodded. However, she said helplessly, that is true, but the Snow Sword faction is a big sect on the Middle Island. The mantra is the foundation of the sect. It is a secret that cannot be passed on. It is impossible for it to be leaked, and it is even more impossible for us to buy it. That is a problem. However, there is always a way. Since we have found the direction, we will be able to find a way to solve it. We just need to spend a bit more time thinking about it, Lin Yi comforted. As the saying went, money could make the gods move. As long as he did not lack spiritual jades, he would definitely be able to get the Snow Sword faction's mantra for Sydney. At that moment, Kai Zhongyang's voice suddenly came from the door. What exactly is troubling the two of you? Do you need my help? Chapter 4098. Such a small matter is not worth mentioning. Those people from the Snow Sword School treated you two like that. Do you think I should be nice to them? Kai Zhongyang said with a smile. However, his gaze soon stopped on Sydney. He said in surprise, Lady Sydney was only at the peak of Heaven Realm before. It hasn't even been half a day, and you've already reached Foundation Establishment. You're truly a heaven-sent genius. Congratulations. Elder Kai is too kind. This is all thanks to Lin Yi. Without his guidance and the Foundation Establishment pills, I wouldn't even be able to reach Foundation Establishment, let alone succeed, Sydney explained. You two are not ordinary people, so don't be too modest. Kai Zhongyang nodded with a smile. Since Lin Yi was Hong Zhong's friend, it was not strange at all that he had Foundation Establishment pills. After a pause, Kai Zhongyang continued, when I was at the door, I heard you two mention the mental cultivation method of the Snow Sword School. Are you two troubled by this? That's right. Lin Yi and Sydney looked at each other. From what they had seen before, this vice shopkeeper was someone they could rely on. There was no need to hide it from him. In that case, please wait a moment. I'll be back soon. Kai Zhongyang smiled mysteriously. He turned and left the room, leaving Lin Yi and Sydney looking at each other. After a while, Kai Zhongyang returned with a simple but exquisite scroll. He smiled and handed it to Lin Yi. This is. Lin Yi took it and opened it. His eyelids twitched and he said in surprise, Snow Sword Mental Cultivation Method. Elder Kai, why do you have this? He was just thinking about how to get his hands on the Snow Sword School's mental cultivation method, and Kai Zhongyang just turned around and gave it to him. He was just about to doze off when someone sent him a pillow. Kai Zhongyang laughed, Master Lin, have you forgotten? My Shifu is a Dan god. Even the heads of these sects, including the Snow Sword School, have to be humble when they ask for my Shifu's help. My Shifu owns the 5 elements commerce, and he doesn't lack spirit jade. If you want him to concoct pills, you'll have to exchange rare resources. Other than those rare treasures, the rest are the mental cultivation methods of the sections. Lin Yi was secretly speechless. The sect masters of Middle Island sects, which one of them wasn't a ruthless character who could shake the world with a stomp of their feet? In the end, they all had to be so humble in front of his cheap master. It could be seen that when one's alchemy skills reached the level of the pill god, they could eat both big and small. But, no matter what, this mental cultivation method was the top secret of the sects, and it wasn't easy for Zhang Liju to get it. He didn't believe that the Snow Sword School didn't have any other treasures, and the only reason was that Zhang Liju wanted this. Kai Zhongyang continued, My Shifu came back a while ago, and he gave me some of the rare treasures he got in recent years. He asked me to be in charge of these rare resources, and prepare for the upcoming Middle Island Auction Festival. Middle Island Auction Festival. Lin Yi paused. In his mind, he couldn't help but think of the Four Islands Auction Festival in the far North Island. Have you never heard of it, Master Lin? The so-called Central Island Auction Festival is a large-scale auction that all the chambers of commerce on the Central Island can participate in. It's officially organized by the Central Island Master and the Council of Elders. It's already the highest standard auction festival among the 5 great islands. Kai Zhongyang explained patiently, every item in this auction is a rare treasure. Mei Shifu gave me this Snow Sword School mental cultivation method in preparation for this. I see. Lin Yi was fascinated by it. Any cultivator would be tempted by this kind of top auction where treasures gathered. However, he could only think about it for now. After all, he had to find a way to get back to the North Island, and he didn't know if he could make it in time. After a pause, Lin Yi suddenly pointed at the Snow Sword mental cultivation method in his hand and asked curiously, Elder Kai, since this was prepared for this, how are you going to auction it if you give it to me now? Kai Zhongyang looked at Lin Yi strangely and smiled, it won't spoil even if I look at it. You can just take a copy and give it back to me later, right? Ah. That works. Lin Yi and Sydney froze. The core mental cultivation method is the secret of each sect. Even if the Snow Sword School gave it to my master, they definitely won't allow anyone to copy it. Even if they win it in the auction, they won't allow anyone to copy it. That's the rule of the Jianghu. But rules are dead. Master Lin, you're Hongzhong's friend, so of course I have to let you off the hook. Kai Zhongyang said with a sigh, Hongzhong and I are friends who have gone through life and death together. We saved each other's lives when we were young, so how could we be restricted by these rules? Lin Yi nodded. It turned out that the two of them were friends who had gone through life and death together. No wonder Kai Zhongyang was so protective of him. Indeed, it was just as he had said. Under normal circumstances, the core mental cultivation methods of the various sects were not allowed to be copied. Not only would the sects pursue this matter if it was spread out, but even if one did not consider this risk, no matter who had spent a huge price to bid for this mental cultivation method, they would definitely hide it. Others might not even be able to take a look at it, let alone copy it. If it weren't for this rule of the Jianghu, if it weren't for the fact that everyone was selfish and liked to keep it a secret, the cultivation methods of all the sects would have been passed down for hundreds and thousands of years, and they would have been spread all over the street. They would not be as rare as they were now. They would not be like the ordinary mental cultivation methods in the secular world in the North Island, which were everywhere. The truly profound mental cultivation methods were extremely rare. In that case, I won't stand on ceremony with you, Elder Kai, Lin Yi said immediately. Although he didn't like to owe people favors, this Snow Sword mental cultivation method was very important to Sydney. Since Kai Zhongyang had already given it to him, there was no reason to refuse it. He could only think of a way to make it up to him in the future. What's more, apart from the relationship with Hongzhong, he and Kai Zhongyang had another closer relationship, which was that they were fellow disciples of the same sect. Even if it wasn't time for them to recognize each other, there was no need to be too polite. He handed the Snow Sword mental cultivation method to Sydney and asked her to copy it on the side. Lin Yi and Kai Zhongyang prepared a table of good dishes and wine, and sat together to chat. Although there was a huge age gap between them, they were both masters of alchemy and had unique medical skills. Whatever they said was a common topic. For a while, they chatted happily. They regretted not meeting each other earlier and became real friends despite their age difference. Chapter 4099. If everything went according to plan, once he reunited with Zhang Liju, this cheap master of his would become his biggest support on Sky Class Island. It wouldn't be a bad idea to know more about him before that. Although he had heard of Zhang Liju's legendary deeds from other people, those were mostly rumors passed down from mouth to mouth. It wasn't as reliable as the words of people close to him like Kai Zhongyang. Man, I'm just a disciple in name, I'm not a proud disciple. Kai Zhongyang shook his head with a smile. A disciple in name is still a proud disciple, otherwise why would he give you resources like the snow sword arts, Elder Kai? Could it be that Grandmaster Zhang has a lot of direct disciples? Lin Yi probed. Direct disciples. Kai Zhongyang raised an eyebrow. Speaking of this, my master is quite unconventional. At his level, which of the other big shots didn't have disciples everywhere? Only my master is different. Not to mention direct disciples, he doesn't even have many disciples in name. He doesn't accept people easily. Oh. Grandmaster Zhang is such a legend, and he doesn't even have a direct disciple. Lin Yi couldn't help but be curious. Only direct disciples could be the true inheritors of the legacy. Could it be that his cheap master had lost all hope, and had even accepted something like a master's legacy? Speaking of this, my master did say something ambiguous before, saying that he should have a direct disciple in the common world. Kai Zhongyang suddenly said. Should. Lin Yi paused. Kai Zhongyang smiled bitterly. That's what my master said, and us disciples were all confused. If he did, then he did, if he didn't, then he didn't. What did this should mean? But my master didn't say much, and we didn't ask. It's become an unsolved mystery in the Hall of Elixir now. At this point, Lin Yi's heart skipped a beat. He didn't know how he did it, but judging from Liju's words, he already knew that Lin Yi had received his inheritance in the common world. It was just that he couldn't confirm it before they met face to face. Lin Yi suddenly remembered. The people who came after Zhang Liju's tomb, could it be? Although he already understood, Lin Yi didn't show it on his face. Instead, he changed the subject. Elder Kai, you're the vice manager of 5 Elements Commerce. I wonder if you could help me get some heart-devouring exquisite grass and life-growing mushrooms. The life mushroom is a little more difficult, but the heart-devouring exquisite grass is not a problem. I will get someone to look in the warehouse. The Chamber of Commerce might not have it, but most of them are ready-made elixirs. However, the pill hall should have it. Kai Zhongyang was very straightforward and agreed without hesitation. Many thanks, Elder Kai. Lin Yi said gratefully. He had only casually asked about the life mushroom, and the heart-devouring exquisite grass was naturally used to refine the foundation-building pill. This wasn't just for himself, more importantly, it was for Sydney. Lin Yi himself was already at the peak of the late phase of foundation building, and he had just broken through not too long ago. He wouldn't be able to use it for a while. However, Sydney's strength was simply too weak. She didn't even have the ability to protect herself. If he didn't increase her strength as soon as possible, if anything were to happen in the future, it could easily lead to a tragedy. The Snow Sword practitioner's arts were already in place, and with the foundation building pill, with Snow Sword's talent, breaking through quickly shouldn't be a problem. In the blink of an eye, 3 days had passed. The Snow Sword School had mobilized all of their forces to put Ling Yi and Sydney on the wanted list. However, it was as if the two had vanished from the face of the earth. Not only were they unable to find them, but there wasn't even a single report of them being seen. Logically speaking, since they had already given out a reward of 1,000 spirit jades, if someone saw it, they would definitely report it to the Snow Sword School. In the end, after 3 days, not even a single person had come. Helpless, the Snow Sword School could only give up for now. They were a huge school, especially in a place like the Middle Island, where dragons and tigers resided. They had all sorts of important matters to attend to every day. They couldn't possibly waste so much manpower for a mere servant girl who had eloped and escaped. As for Wei Shinjin, although he hated Ling Yi and Sydney to the bone, he didn't have the energy to look for them every day. He had already released the news of his wedding. If he continued to delay it, he would only become a laughingstock. Now that the arrow was already knocked on the bow, he had no choice but to marry Sita Qian. In any case, the invitation that he had sent out previously only stated that he, Wei Shinjin, was going to marry a Dao companion. However, it didn't specify who it was. It only said that she was a disciple of the Snow Sword School. Although Sydney had run away, the remaining Sita Qian just so happened to meet this condition and could take her place. Strictly speaking, Wei Shinjin didn't really like Sita Qian. It could only be said that she was a disciple of the Snow Sword School. Although Sydney had run away, the remaining Sita Qian just so happened to meet this condition and could take her place. But now, Wei Shinjin was forced to the point where he had no other choice. He could only use this method. The only thing that comforted him was that Sita Qian's conditions were not bad. Although she wasn't as pretty as Sydney, her appearance wasn't bad either. More importantly, Sita Qian had a strong background. In the Snow Sword School, Wei Shinjin's only backing was the Great Elder. Furthermore, they only had a slight relationship, which couldn't be compared to Sita Qian, the Great Elder's granddaughter. After marrying Sita Qian, not only would he be able to bring home a beauty, his position in the Snow Sword School would also rise. He would become a core disciple that was truly relied upon. It could be considered as killing two birds with one stone. As for Ling Yi and Sydney, no matter how unwilling Wei Shinjin was, he could only put them aside for the time being. It was impossible for the Snow Sword School to continue wasting so much manpower. The past 3 days had already proven that it was impossible to capture someone just by relying on the arrest warrant. If they wanted to obtain an immediate effect, they would have to invite the Law Enforcement Hall of the Middle Island to make a public arrest. It was a pity that the influence of the Snow Sword School was not strong enough to do that. Young hero Lin, let me tell you a piece of good news. The arrest warrant from the Snow Sword School has been removed. Kai Zhongyang quickly brought this news to Lin Yi and Ling Yi. Really? That's great. Lin Yi and Sydney were instantly overjoyed. Even if this did not mean that the Snow Sword School had completely let them go, at least they could move around more freely in the future. They did not need to be cooped up in this room, unable to go out. Chapter 4100. After a pause, Kai Zhongyang said, "Oh, yes, young Master Lin, I've got the news about the heart-devouring exquisite grass you asked me to find. Although I haven't found it in the Chamber of Commerce or the Alchemy Hall, some trial teams have gone to collect it. They'll be back in a few days. Just wait patiently for a while." "Okay, thank you for your trouble, Elder Kai." Lin Yi nodded happily. In the past 3 days, the thing that troubled him the most was how to arrange a place for Sydney in the future. He definitely couldn't go back to Snow Sword School, but it was unrealistic to ask Sydney to follow him back to the North Island. Even if Lin Yi had a relationship with Shengguan Tianhua, it would be very difficult to arrange a place for Sydney to enter the 3 pavilions, especially when Shengguan Tianhua mistakenly thought that there was something going on between him and Shengguan Laner. If he suddenly brought back a super beauty, as Shengguan Laner's grandfather, no matter how open-minded he was, he might have to have a good talk with Lin Yi about his life ideal. If it didn't work, he could only ask Ning Shuafei to find a way to take Shueli to the West Island. It was a gathering place for female cultivators. With the help of Ning Shuafei, the little princess, Shueli should have a good life there. However, this was the last resort. After all, if he wanted to do this, Lin Yi had to take Sydney back to the North Island first. Not only would Shengguan Tianhua know, but the dangers they would encounter along the way were already a big problem that couldn't be solved. Sydney's current strength was really too weak. Moreover, when he took Sydney back, it was already unknown whether Ning Xuefei would still be in the North Island. After all, so many days had passed, and Ning Xuefei just came out to play with Shangwan Laner. It was unlikely that she would stay in the North Island all the time. After pondering for a while, Lin Yi suddenly had a flash of inspiration, and another familiar and beautiful face appeared in his mind, Tian Chan. Last time they parted in a hurry on the far North Island, Lin Yi didn't know how she was now. This unexpected trip to Middle Island was unexpected for Lin Yi, but since he was already here, he must find a way to see Tian Chan. Elder Kai, you're the vice manager of 5 Elements Commerce and Grandmaster Zhang's in-name disciple. You're a member of Nakajima's Hall of Alchemy. Do you know Tian Chan? She is also a disciple of the Pill Hole. Lin Yi asked. Tian Chan. Young hero Lin, if you were to ask other normal Pill Hall disciples, this old man might not necessarily know them. After all, there are so many Pill Hall disciples, and this old man is always at the 5 Elements Chamber of Commerce, so I don't spend much time there. However, this Tian Chan is an exception. Oh. Why is that? Lin Yi was puzzled. Hey, this old man knows her because there has been an uproar about something related to her recently. Everyone in the Middle Island Dan Hall, including the entire 5 Elements Chamber of Commerce, knows about it, so this old man has also heard of it. Kai Zhongyang said. What is it? Elder Kai, tell me quickly. Lin Yi's heart tightened as he asked quickly. Although Tian Chan was not as miserable as Shueli in Middle Island, she was still in a bad situation. She was alone, and no matter what happened, she would not be the one to benefit from it. It's a long story. The source has to start from the North Island. Kai Zhongyang immediately told Lin Yi everything he knew about Tian Chan. Finally, he sighed and said, this Tian Chan is also a girl with a hard life. She was forced to marry someone at such a young age. Heaven is really jealous of her beauty. Before he finished speaking, Kai Zhongyang's eyelids suddenly twitched. Then, he saw that Lin Yi's body suddenly emitted an extremely violent aura. He was puzzled and secretly shocked. If he wasn't wrong, Lin Yi's strength should only be at the peak of the late stage of Foundation establishment. However, this aura, why did it feel like it was comparable to a beginner stage gold core expert? Zheng Dongjue, you old man. If I don't tear you into pieces in this life, Lin Yi, swear that I'm not a human. Lin Yi was so angry that the veins on his forehead bulged. He clenched his fists tightly and flew into a rage. With his personality, even if someone was stupid enough to provoke him, he would at most kill them. Normally, he wouldn't get angry at all, let alone lose control of his emotions like now. However, today, after hearing about Tian Chan's experience, Lin Yi completely lost control. This time, he accidentally came to Middle Island. First, he heard about Sydney's matter. Now, he learned about Tian Chan's miserable experience. How could Lin Yi not go berserk? Lin Yi, calm down first. Seeing this, Sydney quickly pulled him, for fear that he would lose control of his emotions and rush out. One must know that this was Middle Island, where experts gathered. Gold core experts were everywhere and Foundation establishment experts were like dogs. Once Lin Yi lost control and went berserk, he would definitely be the one to suffer. Young hero Lin, why are you so agitated? Kai Zhongyang looked at Lin Yi's reaction and couldn't help but feel strange. Tian Chan is the same as me. When we were in the secular world, she and Lin Yi. Sydney had to explain with a blush. Although she didn't finish her words, Kai Zhongyang had already understood. He couldn't help but sigh in his heart. This Lin Yi was really a romantic person. When he was in the secular world, he had so many beauties. This Sydney in front of him was already a first-class super beauty. He heard that Tian Chan was the same. The words femme fatale were really not wrong at all, especially on Heaven's Stage Island where the strong preyed on the weak. Whether it was Sydney or Tian Chan, the reason why they attracted so much trouble was because they were too beautiful. However, Kai Zhongyang suddenly thought of his master. In fact, it was the same. He brought Master Bing and Master Shui from the secular world, and it seemed to have caused quite a stir in the beginning. Kai Zhongyang pondered for a moment, then said to Lin Yi, "Young hero Lin, it's not impossible for you to meet Tian Chan. My senior and junior brothers are all in the pill hole. We are all Master's nominal disciples, and we take care of each other. I can ask them for help and let you meet Tian Chan really." Lin Yi's berserk aura stopped momentarily, and his mind slowly recovered from the rage. Kai Zhongyang nodded affirmatively and said, "But you have to promise me one thing first. You can't be impulsive. My master is not in the pill hall now, and Jing Dongjue is the most powerful deputy hall master. He is the person with the most power in the pill hall. If you want to challenge him with your current strength, you are courting death. Even I can't help you." Lin Yi took a deep breath and lowered his head to calm down for a moment. Then, he nodded and agreed, "Okay, I will listen to Elder Kai." Chapter 4101. Well, in a few days, I will take the opportunity of preparing for the auction of Zhongdao to go back to Alchemy Hall. At that time, young hero Lin, you can pretend to be my attendant. What do you think? Kai Zhongyang suggested. Thank you, old Kai. Lin Yi was grateful from the bottom of his heart. Just because they were friends, Kai Zhongyang was willing to help him so much. He must remember this kindness and favor. Although he still had to wait for a few more days, Lin Yi's heart was full of expectation at the moment. Even though he had met her last time in the far North Island, after hearing what happened to Tian Chan recently, Lin Yi's mood to meet Tian Chan had become eager. As Lin Yi's woman, Sydney was not very jealous of this. Instead, she empathized with Tian Chan's experience. After all, wasn't she the same? She was the same, and so was Tian Chan. It seemed that the beautiful female cultivators from the secular world could not escape this disaster. She didn't know how Rock Candy was now. In the past, Shueli and Rock Candy were sworn enemies in the secular world. But now that she thought about it, the so-called grudge between them was nothing. Sydney couldn't help but ask, "By the way, Lin Yi, besides Tian Chan and me, who else did you find from the secular world?" She was too embarrassed to point out that it was Rock Candy, but Lin Yi understood what she meant. He shook his head and said, "I have no news of these confidants except you and Tian Chan. But as for others, Zhongping Liang, Kong Ming Ming, and Dongfang Bideo were all transmitted to the North Island like me and joined the 3 pavilions of the North Island." "I see." Sydney couldn't help but be a little disappointed, but she still forced herself to comfort him. "It's okay. I believe they will all be fine. As long as you are here, we will all be together again." "Yes, I will." Lin Yi nodded heavily, but the worry in his heart still lingered. It was only now that he found out about Sydney and Tian Chan. Furthermore, they were not in a good situation. Heaven knew how Han Jingjing and the other girls were doing right now. If he wanted to find them, he had to raise his strength as soon as possible. Otherwise, he would not be able to move an inch no matter where he went. Middle Island Pill Hole. He came out of the room of the will of heaven. Tian Chan's expression was calm, but there was a hint of helplessness. After so long, the will of heaven was still the same as before, crazy and crazy. He still refused to admit himself. Now that things had come to this, Tian Chan no longer wished for the Heaven Path to acknowledge her. She only wished that she could do her best to take care of this elder who was related to her by blood. However, the heaven path would curse her every time they saw each other, and now it was only getting worse. What was she to do? At this moment, a figure flashed out from the darkness and stopped her. It was her brother-in-law in name. Xing Tianchu. Sister-in-law, are you here to send medicine to Master Tian again? It's lonely to be alone. Let me accompany you next time. Xing Tianchu's eyes glanced up and down at Tian Chan's exquisite body. Tian Chan frowned. There was a flash of disgust in her eyes. She didn't want to talk to him, but out of courtesy, she still endured the disgust and said, "No, I can do it alone." "I don't know what else you want, young master." Xing Tianchu didn't notice this. He took a step closer to Tian Chan and said with a frivolous smile, "I heard people say that Middle Island has not been peaceful recently. Recently, our Central Island has not been peaceful. 2 traitors escaped from the Snow Sword faction. One of them is a rapist. He has already taken away a female disciple of Snow Sword School. Sister-in-law, you have to be careful. Don't be tricked. Thank you for your concern, but this is Middle Island Pill Hole. No matter how blind the rapist is, it is impossible for him to come to such a place." Tian Chan took a step back calmly. "Be that as it may, you still can't stop someone's lust. Especially with such a beautiful woman like you here, that rapist might get hot-headed and come over. As the saying goes, even if one were to die under a peony, he would still be a romantic even if he became a ghost." Xing Tianchu's smile became more and more frivolous, and he took another step forward. The meaning of flirting was obvious. In addition, there was no one around. Tian Chan knew that if she continued to pester like this, the other party might have lustful thoughts and make a move. At that time, it would be difficult to deal with it. Tian Chan immediately turned cold and frowned. "Young master, you worry too much. If there is nothing else, please let me go. I have to go back first." "Oh, sister-in-law, don't be so anxious. Anyway, no one will accompany you when you go back. You are in the prime of your life. It is the time to have fun. But you stay alone in your room. Don't you think it is boring?" Xing Tianchu did not give up. Not only did he not let her go, but he reached out to touch Tian Chan's face. Tian Chan quickly avoided and warned with a cold face, "Men and women should not touch each other. I am your sister-in-law. Young master, please behave yourself." "Sister-in-law, don't be so serious." Xing Tianchu suddenly laughed and looked up and down at Tian Chan. His eyes were full of obscenity. He chattered on, "People say that women need a man's nourishment to stay young and beautiful. Although you are my sister-in-law and my cousin's woman, my cousin is dead now. He doesn't have the ability to nourish you. But now that I have inherited his position, I naturally have to fulfill the corresponding responsibility. What do you say, sister-in-law?" Such explicit and shameless words really made Tian Chan angry. When they first met, Xing Tianchu was frivolous, but at least he still maintained the last bit of bottom line. But now, as her position in Xing Dongjue's eyes was gradually consolidated, his behavior began to become more unscrupulous. After several encounters, Tian Chan had a deep understanding of Xing Tianchu's shameless nature. The more she pestered him, the more excited he became, and the more he wanted to take a yard when given an inch. "Young master, does your grandfather know that you are doing this?" Tian Chan snorted coldly and immediately ignored him. She turned sideways and directly walked around him. "Humph, you still want to play chastity with me? Interesting, I want to see how long you can last." Looking at Tian Chan's graceful back, Xing Tianchu's eyes suddenly flashed a trace of ruthlessness. Although he had always coveted his sister-in-law, his patience was always limited. Now, his patience was almost exhausted. A few days later, Lin Yi finally received the exact news from Kai Zhongyang. He had already discussed with the senior at the Dan Hall. Now that everything was ready, he could bring Lin Yi to see Tian Chan. Chapter 4102. This time, he showed up with his original appearance. After all, the appearance of Wu Fu with the 1,000 silk mask had been plastered all over the street. Although the Snow Sword faction had withdrawn the wanted order, there were too many people on the street. It was hard to guarantee that no one would notice him. It was better to show his original appearance. Anyway, no one in the Middle Island would be able to recognize him. The Middle Island Pill Hall was one of the top sects in Middle Island. Whether it was status or influence, it was an outstanding existence. This could be seen just from its geographical location. Middle Cauldron Mountain was located in the center of Middle Island. Not only did it represent the highest mountain in Middle Island, but its unique location and environment also nurtured a large number of legendary realm experts. According to records, the earliest batch of cultivators on Heaven Island settled down in Middle Cauldron Mountain. After thousands or even tens of thousands of years, the cultivation world on Heaven Island was prosperous. Middle Cauldron Mountain's high status on Heaven Island was undeniable. Settling down in Middle Cauldron Mountain not only meant that one could occupy coveted cultivation resources, but more importantly, it represented an unparalleled transcendental status on Middle Island. Even those powerful sects that could establish a foothold on Middle Island, including the Snow Sword faction, had never been able to reach the core area of Middle Cauldron Mountain. There were no more than 5 transcendental forces that could enter Middle Cauldron Mountain in the entire Heaven Island, and the Middle Island Pill Hall was one of them. Following Kai Zhongyang all the way to the entrance of the Middle Island Pill Hall, Lin Fan looked at the quaint, tranquil and beautiful paradise inside, and then looked at the bustling scene outside. It was just a door away, but there was such a stark contrast. Even Lin Yi couldn't help but sigh when he saw it. This feeling of serenity in the midst of chaos reminded Lin Yi of a saying in the secular world. It was said that those who could live in a courtyard house in the core area of Yanjing were the big shots. The wonderful scene in front of him. Wasn't that the case before? The layout of the Middle Island Pill Hall was like a super villa with an exquisite structure. Other than a few large doors, there were quiet and elegant pavilions connected to each other at almost every location. They were all intertwined and looked magnificent. He passed through one door after another without any obstruction. However, there were no guards in sight. It was the complete opposite of what he had expected. Lin Yi couldn't help but ask in a low voice, "Elder Kai, has the Nakajima Alchemy Hall always been like this? Why aren't there any guards? A place like the Pill Hall." Whether it was ready-made elixirs or elixir materials, they were all treasures that made people's hearts pound. No matter how famous the Middle Island Pill Hall was, in the face of benefits, it was hard to guarantee that people wouldn't take risks out of desperation. This was human nature, and it couldn't be stopped. Kai Zhongyang smiled and said, "Young hero Lin, there's something you don't know. Don't be fooled by the fact that we didn't see any guards along the way. This place is loose on the outside but tight on the inside. Those guards are just hiding in the dark. He just didn't want outsiders to see it. The security of our Pill Hall is second to none even in all of the 5 great islands of the Heaven Stage. The reason why they didn't come to interrogate you is because I got someone to specially inform them earlier." "I see," Lin Yi finally understood. If the security was really as loose as it looked, then in the Heaven Stage Island where the strong preyed on the weak, the Middle Island Pill Hall wouldn't have such a high position today. Moments later, Lin Yi followed Kai Zhongyang to a small manor deep in the core. Compared to the outside, the environment here was better, and there were very few people. There wasn't even a normal disciple passing by. Seeing that Lin Yi was curious, Kai Zhongyang turned around and introduced, "This garden is an area specially reserved for the disciples under our master. Other normal disciples don't have the right to enter or exit here. Even the vice head has to inform us if he wants to enter or exit here." Lin Yi nodded. Zhang Liju was the one who created the Middle Island Pill Hall, and it wasn't strange for his disciples to have this privilege. At this time, a young man walked over and smiled at the two. "Brother Kai, you guys are here. Is this the Lin Yi you told me about?" Lin Yi turned around and looked at Kai Zhongyang. He smiled and nodded. "That's right, this is Lin Yi. Young hero Lin, this is Ho Guanqi. He's the same as me, a disciple under master's name. But don't look at him just because he looks young. He's our big disciple. Be it talent or strength, he's the highest among us, and the one that master values the most." "I'm Lin Yi, nice to meet you, Senior Ho," Lin Yi quickly greeted. The guy looked so young, and it felt weird to call him Elder Ho. He might not like it, but he couldn't call him big disciple directly. He could only call him senior for now. Lin Yi, don't be nervous. I've known Hong Zhong for a long time, and I've heard about your situation from Kai Zhongyang. I'll do my best to help." Ho Guanqi had a friendly smile on his face as he patted Lin Yi's shoulder. "That's right. I was able to bring you here successfully because of big disciple Ho's help. Otherwise, even I wouldn't be able to bring people back so casually. After all, this is an important place for the Pill Hall. Unless it's a disciple of our sect, outsiders aren't allowed to enter." Kai Zhongyang explained. "Thank you, Senior Ho," Lin Yi said gratefully. Then, he couldn't contain the excitement in his heart and asked impatiently, "When can I see Tian Chan?" Ho Guanqi and Kai Zhongyang looked at each other and smiled. Then, he said to Lin Yi, "My friend, you're really infatuated. Don't worry, I promise that you'll get what you want. However, we need to keep this a secret. We can't go to Tian Chan directly. We need to find a compromise." "A compromise?" Lin Yi was slightly stunned. He knew that if he went to see Tian Chan directly, it would be easy for people to notice him. With Tian Chan's current sensitive identity, it wouldn't be good for her. "That's right. I've heard of something that can be put to use." Ho Guanqi nodded and said, "I've heard that Tian Chan has been visiting Elder Tian a lot lately. Every few days, she would go there. So, if we spread the word that we found an alchemist to treat Elder Tian, people won't care about it. But if Tian Chan hears about it, she'll definitely go there." "That's right. Let Tian Chan take the initiative to go over. It's better than us looking for her. That way, young hero Lin, you and Tian Chan will only have a chance encounter and won't be noticed by others." Kai Zhongyang agreed. Chapter 4103. Ho Guanqi and Kai Zhongyang looked at each other and sighed. The elder Tian we're talking about was the former vice island master of Middle Island, the Will of Heaven. He was also a legendary figure, but because he cultivated the Heaven's Fortune battle art, he went berserk, and his meridians were all broken. He became a cripple. "Ah! It's him." Lin Yi was stunned. He remembered that Chancellor Nan Tian had mentioned this person in the secular world. "It seems like you've heard of him. Elder Tian has a close relationship with our master. Since then, he has been staying in the Pill Hall to recuperate. Unfortunately, there has been no effect. Part of the reason why Master has been missing all these years is to find a way to treat him. When Master isn't around, us brothers and sisters take care of him." Ho Guanqi explained. Kai Zhongyang continued, "That's why we had young hero Lin meet Tian Chan this time. Actually, we're using Elder Tian as a cover. Anyway, We've already invited doctors from outside to come in and treat Elder Tian, so no one will suspect anything. Thank you for the trouble. When do we go? Lin Yi asked. Ho Guanqi chuckled and said, since little friend is so impatient, you can go over right now. Either way, I've already arranged for people ahead of time. The news will soon reach Tian Chan's ears. I believe she won't just sit and watch. After the three of them discussed, they immediately set off for the private recuperation place specially prepared for the will of heaven. Although Lin Yi was a little curious as to why Tian Chan was taking care of Elder Tian, he thought that it was probably a task assigned by the pill hall. Entering the room, he saw an old man with an imposing figure. He was in good spirits, and he could vaguely feel a trace of the heroic spirit he had in the past. However, between his brows, there was a lingering sense of helplessness and dejection. This was the first time Lin Yi saw the will of heaven, the legendary figure of Sky Class Island. He was now a cripple, and in terms of strength, he might not even be a match for a normal person. However, a legend was still a legend. No matter how poor he was now, he wouldn't truly be ordinary. Seeing the three enter, the will of heaven didn't speak as harshly as he did to Tian Chan. Instead, he smiled calmly, "Oh, it's Ho and Kai. Did you two bring me some elixir again? Or did you think of some other method?" All these years, it wasn't just Zhang Liju, Ho Guanqi and the other disciples didn't give up, they were always looking for a way to cure the disease, bringing back some rare herbs from time to time, but it was useless every time. No, actually, the two of us invited a medicine master to take a look at you, Elder Sky. It's Lin Yi, our little friend. Ho Guanqi forced himself to explain. The will of heaven. When Tianqing heard this, his gaze fell on Lin Yi. He was a little surprised. This apothecary was a little too young, wasn't he? Although when one's strength reached a certain level, they wouldn't age. To an experienced person, even if it was just from a person's temperament, they would be able to determine the person's true age. He could also determine this person's true age. As a legendary figure in the past, Tianqing naturally did not lack this little bit of insight. However, although he could tell that Lin Yi was young, the will of heaven didn't underestimate him at all. After all, age and strength weren't necessarily proportional. Some people were young, but they were geniuses. Their achievements in just a few years were something others wouldn't be able to achieve even if they spent hundreds or thousands of years. For example, he and Zhang Liju were both living examples. Plus, other than being an elixir god, Zhang Liju also had the identity of a medical saint. His disciples were all extraordinary as well. For example, Kai Zhongyang was a famous medical master in Zhongdao. This young elixir master in front of him was able to get their approval. He was probably not a simple person. This Lin Yi seemed to be quite capable. Then I'll have to trouble Elixir Lin. Please, the will of heaven politely invited Lin Yi to sit at the side. Looking at the will of heaven's expectant face, Ho Guanqi and Kai Zhongyang looked at each other helplessly. Although they were here to help Lin Yi, they were actually using the will of heaven to trick people. Lin Yi wasn't an elixir master at all. He was just using this identity to make it easier for him to meet Tian Chan, Elder Tian, actually we. Ho Guanqi was about to confess the truth to the will of heaven when suddenly, footsteps came from outside the door. A moment later, Tian Chan appeared at the door with a face full of concern. Behind her was Xing Tianchu, who refused to leave like a ghost. Everyone was surprised. It was expected that Tian Chan would be attracted here, but what was with this Xing Tianchu? Why was he here? Finally seeing Tian Chan, Lin Yi was delighted. At the same time, he was also puzzled. Who was this guy following behind her? His eyes were filled with lust. One look and you could tell that he wasn't a good person. On the other side, Tian Chan's body shook as soon as she saw Lin Yi. She was also overjoyed, and it took a lot of effort for her not to show any strange expression. After all, Jing Tianchu was following behind her, and if he knew about her relationship with Lin Yi, it would be big trouble. What are you doing here? Before everyone spoke, the will of heaven had already shouted at Tian Chan, I have told you many times, don't come to see me, you are not welcome here. If it was in the past, Tian Chan might have retreated, but now that she suddenly saw Lin Yi, she immediately understood that the other party must have used this reason to see her, and would not leave at this time. Senior, Chan, just wants to see you and do my best. Tian Chan immediately turned to Jing Tianchu and said with a faint expression, thank you for sending me off. I will go in to see the elder Tian. You can go back. Jing Tianchu suddenly became anxious and quickly said, don't, there are so many people here, and there is a stranger I have never seen before. What if it is that? What if I told you about the flower thief before? After a pause, Jing Tianchu immediately stared at Lin Yi with an evil face and asked, who are you? You are not a disciple of Dan Hall, right? How did you sneak in here? Hurry up and tell me the truth. Before Lin Yi could speak, Ho Guanqi frowned and replied in a cold voice, this is the pharmacist we invited to diagnose the elder Tian. Jing Tianchu, this is a major event related to the recovery of the elder Tian. Can you afford to offend the pharmacist? Chapter 4104. Do we need you to teach us how to do things? Jing Tianchu, you don't think that just because you are Jing Dongjua's grandson that you can be disrespectful to us. Ho Guanqi was enraged and released a strong aura, pressuring Jing Tianchu to the point that he couldn't breathe. Jing Tianchu felt as if a bucket of cold water had been poured on his head, and he was frightened. Because of the rise in his status, he had long forgotten that his grandfather Jing Dongjue was only the vice-head of the alchemy hall, and the master of these two people in front of him, Zhang Liju, was the true master of the alchemy hall. Although he was seen as the future successor by Jing Dongjue and had taken over Jing Tianjie's position, even Jing Tianjie didn't dare to show any disrespect to Ho Guanqi and the other disciples. After all, his grandfather didn't even dare to fart in front of these people's backing. Although Jing Tianchu realized that he was a little too arrogant and wanted to retreat, he still didn't want to lose face in front of Tian Chan. Jing Tianchu didn't dare to talk back to Ho Guanqi, but he vented his anger on Lin Yi, pointing at him and threatening fiercely, "Humph, kid, do you know the consequences of coming to our alchemy hall to cheat? If you can't cure Elder Tian today, don't even think about walking out of here." Tian Chan heard this and panicked a little, defending Lin Yi, Master Chu, what you said isn't appropriate, right? Elder Tian's illness is something that even Dan God can't do anything about. Even if this medicine master is skilled, how can he cure Elder Tian in one go? If you really do this, who would dare to come and treat Elder Tian in the future? Oh, sis-in-law, don't tell me you've fallen for this pretty boy. Jing Tianchu looked at Tian Chan and Lin Yi unkindly. He curled his lips and laughed coldly, sis-in-law, don't forget your identity. You are my cousin Jing Tianjie's official wife. You are a member of House Jing when you live, and a ghost of House Jing when you die. Now, you are siding with an outsider. What's the meaning of helping an outsider bully me, your brother-in-law? Hearing this, Lin Yi secretly clenched his fist. If this wasn't the pill hall, he would definitely kill this Jing Tianchu just because of these words. Even if they were forced into a ghost marriage, Tian Chan would always be Lin Yi's woman. This would never change. Jing family. Who does he think he is? Since you want Tian Chan to be a ghost of the Jing family after she dies, then I'll turn your Jing family into a ghost first. Tian Chan was startled when she heard this, but she replied without batting an eyelid, I'm just telling the truth. Young Master Chu, I advise you to think before you speak. Otherwise, If these ugly words were to spread, not only would my image be damaged, but the entire Jin clan would also lose face. Really? Alright, I'll see if he has the ability first. Don't forget that as a disciple of the Pill Hall, I also know medicine. If he really is an expert in medicine, then so be it. If he isn't, I'll be able to tell at a glance. Humph humph. Jing Tianchu sneered and threatened. As he had always coveted Tian-chan, he could quickly detect any abnormal reaction from Tian-chan. His intuition told him that his sister-in-law seemed to have some inexplicable feelings towards this medicine master who popped out of nowhere. So today, he must keep a close eye on this person. When Ho Guanqi and Kai Zhongyang saw this, they couldn't help but feel anxious in their hearts. If they allowed Jing Tianchu to stand here, not only would it affect Lin Yi and Tian Chan's meeting. More importantly, Lin Yi's identity as a medicine master would be exposed immediately. Once this matter got out of hand, even if they were Zhang Liju's disciples, it would be hard for them to protect Lin Yi. After all, their master Zhang Liju wasn't here, and the Pill Hall was under the Vice Hall Master Jing Dongjue's control. These disciples only had a high position, but they didn't have enough power to go against Jing Dongjue. Moreover, if they were to really talk about this matter, they were the ones at fault first. At this moment, Lin Yi looked at Jing Tianchu indifferently and said with a normal expression, "Is this the way your Pill Hall treats your guests? I was invited here to treat the will of heaven, not to be wronged. This person doesn't seem to welcome me." Ho Guanqi's eyes lit up, and he immediately scolded, "Jing Tianchu, did you hear that? Why aren't you leaving now?" Jing Tianchu was furious when he heard this. As the grandson of Jing Dongjue, his position in the Pill Hall was like the sun in the sky. He had never been scolded like this before. He pointed at the crowd and said, "You. How dare you?" Before he could finish, he was interrupted by Ho Guanqi. "I'll ask you one more time, are you going to leave or not? Treating Elder Tian's injury is something my master Dan God ordered. You're trying to disobey my master's order and betray the Pill Hall." When the word betray came out, Jing Tianchu couldn't help but shiver. With such a big accusation on him, no matter how strong his background was, he would still die. You. Jing Tianchu gritted his teeth in anger, but under the stare of the two disciples of Zhang Liju, Ho Guanqi and Kai Zhongyang, he didn't dare to be tough anymore. He could only snort coldly and angrily, "Fine, then I'll wait at the door. I'd like to see how you're going to clean up this mess. Sister-in-law, come with me." Jing Tianchu was still worried about Tian-chan, and he reached out to hold her hand. However, Tian-chan nimbly dodged it and said indifferently, "No need, I'll stay here." Jing Tianchu didn't dare to use force in front of everyone. Helplessly, he could only walk out the door alone. In the room, Ho Guanqi and Kai Zhongyang could only look at each other and smile bitterly. Although Jing Tianchu had been driven out, this guy would definitely be guarding the door like a haunting ghost. The paper could not wrap up the fire, and when the time came, he would still be exposed. The two of them did not know what to do for a while. At this moment, Lin Yi sat beside Tianqing calmly and gestured for him to extend his hand. Then, Lin Yi started to feel Tianqing's pulse. He was acting like a doctor who had achieved the Tao. Tian-chan couldn't help but be surprised. Since when did Lin Yi become a medicine master, and was even invited by Ho Guanqi and Kai Zhongyang to treat the will of heaven? However, being surprised was just being surprised. Tian-chan still had confidence in Lin Yi. She knew that Lin Yi's medical skills were superb when they were in the common world. Even if he couldn't completely cure the will of heaven, he should be able to diagnose something. Ho Guanqi and Kai Zhongyang, on the other hand, didn't know anything about this. They thought that Lin Yi was just putting on a show, and their expressions froze. Chapter 4105. Kai Zhongyang shrugged helplessly. After interacting with Lin Yi for the past few days, he felt that although the guy was young, he was reliable and reliable. Otherwise, the two wouldn't have become good friends. He really didn't expect things to turn out this way. It couldn't be helped. Since Lin Yi didn't want to say it, Kai Zhongyang felt like he had to force himself to say it for him. This was better than being exposed and being discovered by the Sky Elder himself. With all the effort they'd put into helping the Sky Elder all these years, he believed that the Sky Elder would be disappointed at most, and wouldn't pursue the matter too much. Kai Zhongyang knew that Jing Tianchu was guarding outside the door, and so he secretly used his strength to create an artificial barrier. It was invisible and hard to detect, but if one paid close attention, they would realize that standing at the door, they wouldn't be able to hear the sound inside the room. It had been blocked. Of course, this was only effective against Jing Tianchu. It wouldn't have any effect on higher-level masters. Immediately, Kai Zhongyang was ready to confess to the Sky Elder, but Lin Yi had already finished taking his pulse. He concluded with a surprised expression, "Sky Elder, your injuries. Not only are all the meridians in your body completely shattered, even the original meridians are starting to blur. This is really unprecedented, even gods can't heal you." Everyone froze at the same time. Ho Guanqi and Kai Zhongyang looked at each other, stunned. So this Lin Yi wasn't just putting on an act, he really did have some skills. Indeed, it was as Lin Yi said, the root cause of the Sky Elder's injuries was this, the shattered meridians. Different from Si Haixiao's broken meridians, even a miracle medicine like the meridian opening elixir wouldn't have any effect. This was the reason why Zhang Liju and the other disciples couldn't do anything about it. There was only one way to truly heal him, and that was to reconnect the broken meridians in his body bit by bit. This was an action that defied the laws of nature. Even Zhang Liju, who was known as the medical saint, didn't have such a terrifying ability. None of them had such a terrifying ability, and it was precisely because of this that the will of heaven's injuries had dragged on until now, leaving them helpless. After listening to Lin Yi's words, the will of heaven's heart sank. A trace of disappointment flashed across his eyes as he smiled bitterly, even the gods can't cure it. This means that there's no cure at all, Tian Chan looked at Lin Yi. At the same time, he couldn't help but pray and desire. She also knew that if this kind of thing could be cured, then it could be cured. If it couldn't be cured, then it couldn't be cured. However, the will of heaven was an elder who was related to her by blood. She really couldn't bear to see him so helpless and depressed. Unexpectedly, Lin Yi shook his head and said with a smile, "That's not entirely true. Immortals are not omnipotent. There are things that immortals can't do. It's not necessarily impossible for us mortals." Ah. Ho Guanqi and Kai Zhongyang couldn't help but look at each other. Their hearts that had just calmed down were instantly on tenterhooks for Lin Yi again. This was too big of a statement. How could he possibly have a way to deal with something that even his own master was helpless about? This little friend of his was really worrisome. The will of heaven's eyes lit up like a drowning man who had grabbed onto the last life-saving straw. He stared at Lin Yi and asked, "Could it be that you have a way to cure my injuries?" After waiting helplessly and desperately for so long, he wasn't afraid of Lin Yi bragging. Lin Yi didn't even dare to boast, not even daring to give it a try. That'd be the end of all hope. Lin Yi smiled faintly, to be honest, with Elder Tian's injuries, anyone else wouldn't have been able to hold on much longer. But a legend is a legend, after all. Elder Tian is so energetic right now, it can be said that he's protecting your last chance of recovery. I can't say that I can completely cure you, but I'm willing to try. Lin Yi, little friend, this concerns Elder Tian's life, this isn't a child's play, you have to think this through. Ho Guanqi and Kai Zhongyang quickly reminded him. Lin Yi's words were so convincing, but they still found it hard to believe. It wasn't because they looked down on Lin Yi, but because they cared for him. After all, even the holy Dr. Zhang Liju couldn't do anything, and a little kid like Lin Yi said that he could. That was too much of an exaggeration. However, the will of heaven interrupted the two. It's fine, Alchemist Lin, go ahead and try. No matter what the result is, I believe it won't be worse than my current state. I will only be grateful and not blame you. Alright then, let's start now. With that, Lin Yi grabbed his wrist and channeled the art of dragon mastery, starting the healing process. Ho Guanqi and Kai Zhongyang were puzzled. What kind of healing method was this? Why did it look like he was checking the injury and not healing it? But seeing the solemn expression on Elder Tian's face, they didn't dare disturb himself. They could only watch worriedly from the sidelines. The only thing they could do now was to protect the two. Time passed bit by bit, and after a full 2 hours, Lin Yi slowly retracted his qi, the healing process finally coming to an end. Elder Tian, how do you feel? Ho Guanqi and Kai Zhongyang quickly asked. After sensing the situation in his body, Tian Xing's face suddenly filled with extreme shock. He looked at his right arm in disbelief and paled in shock. The meridians in my arm have actually recovered. Really? When Ho and Guanqi heard this, they were instantly shocked. However, they didn't need him to answer before they knew that Tian Xing's words were absolutely true. Because they noticed to their shock that the spiritual energy in the room had actually started to surge towards Tian Xing's right arm. As a legendary figure in Nakajima, the will of heaven's strength was undeniable, and he could control the qi in the air with a single thought. This was a skill that ordinary people couldn't comprehend, but it was a piece of cake for him. Of course, there was a prerequisite for this, and that was the recovery of his meridians. Elder Tian, you've really recovered. Ho Guanqi and Kai Zhongyang, on the other hand, looked at Lin Yi as if they were looking at a monster. Treating the will of heaven was originally just an excuse, but they didn't think that it would turn out to be real. What was even more surprising was that the incurable disease that even their master Zhang Liju couldn't do anything about was actually cured by Lin Yi. The two couldn't help but think that this Lin Yi couldn't be some legendary figure in disguise, could he? Chapter 4106. Reconnect the meridians in my right arm. Ho Guanqi and Kai Zhongyang were both stunned. Then, they heard the will of heaven say excitedly, Medicine Master Lin is truly a genius. Even if you only help me reconnect the meridians in my right arm, it is already unimaginable. I cannot thank you enough and I will remember it. You're too kind. This is the duty of a doctor. Lin Yi smiled faintly. In fact, if he really wanted to use his full strength, he could completely heal the other party. He just wanted to avoid shocking the world, so he was just testing his skills in healing a part of the other party's meridians. Even so, Lin Yi's image in everyone's eyes had suddenly become unfathomable. The will of heaven was extremely grateful. As for Ho Guanqi and Kai Zhongyang, they did not dare to treat Lin Yi as an ordinary junior anymore. Looking at this scene, Tian Chan was sincerely happy for Lin Yi and the will of heaven. One was the man she entrusted her life to, the other was a senior who was related to her by blood. Other than the will of heaven, she was the most excited person in her heart. However, she did not dare to show it too much. My friend, Lin Yi, how did you do it? Ho Guanqi and Kai Zhongyang were impatient and could not help but ask curiously. They were all divine doctors, and it was impossible for them not to feel an itch in their hearts when it came to healing the broken meridians, which was a nearly heaven-defying method. Seniors, you don't have to be curious. The reason why I can do this is because my mental cultivation method is a little special. Lin Yi smiled and then made a request. However, I hope that everyone can keep this method of treatment a secret. If you tell others, just say that acupuncture and medicinal pills are the treatment. My friend, Lin Yi, don't worry. This is the top secret of our pill hole. Even if you don't say it, we will pay attention to it. Moreover, we won't tell others, and no one will dare to ask us about it. Ho Guanqi and Kai Zhongyang guaranteed. That's good. Lin Yi nodded. This was related to the Will of Heaven, the former deputy master of Middle Island. Even if there was a slight leak, it would inevitably attract the attention of many big shots of Middle Island, even if one of them had ill intentions towards him. That would be a huge trouble. As the few of them were talking, Jing Tianchu finally couldn't help but push open the door. Immediately after, he saw Tian Xing's right arm condensing the spiritual energy of heaven and earth. He was so shocked that his jaw dropped. Kai Zhongyang removed the barrier without a trace and sneered at Jing Tianchu. What do you think? Now, heaven has recovered an arm. Is this apothecary we invited a swindler? Jing Tianchu was speechless for a long time. Even if his medical skills were not as good as those present, but he grew up in the pill hole. Under the influence of what he saw and heard, his eyesight was still far above ordinary people. To be able to cure the will of heaven, even if it was just an arm, was definitely an incredible thing. If he still insisted that the other party was a swindler, then not only him, even his grandfather Jing Dongjue, the deputy hall master of the pill hall, could not even compare to a swindler. He couldn't even compare to a swindler, so he could only go to the streets to beg. The truth was right in front of him. No matter how arrogant Jing Tianchu was, he did not dare to fart anymore. He could only force himself to ignore everyone and said to Tian Chan, "Sister-in-law, you have seen heaven. Elder Tian, you've already seen it. Hurry up and follow me." Tian Chan shook her head decisively. "No. Heaven has just recovered a little. Elder Sky has only just recovered a little. I have to stay behind to take care of him." You. Jing Tianchu still wanted to forcefully pull Tian Chan away. However, under the intense stares of Ho Guanqi and Kai Zhongyang, especially at this moment, even the will of heaven was looking at him with hostility. This was a legendary figure who could be mentioned in the same breath as the pill god Zhang Liju. If he was at his peak, even his grandfather Jing Dongjue could only look up to him. The situation was stronger than the person. Jing Tianchu did not dare to act rashly again. He could only snort coldly and leave alone. After finally chasing this annoying dog skin plaster away, Ho Guanqi turned to Lin Yi and smiled. "The annoying guy is gone. Lin Yi, little friend, if you have anything to say, you can say it now." Lin Yi nodded and immediately walked over and reached out to hold Tian Chan. However, before he could speak, the will of heaven was shocked and his face changed. When he saw that both Ho Guanqi and Kai Zhongyang did not look surprised, he couldn't help but be surprised. "Alchemist Lin, don't think that you can be like Jing Tianchu and tease the Tian clan just because you cured me." The will of heaven was furious. Even if he had just recovered his right arm, he could already control part of the spiritual energy around him. He immediately pressed down on Lin Yi with a monstrous force. Ha! Lin Yi was stunned when he heard this. While resisting the coercion of the other party, his eyes turned back and forth between the will of heaven and Tian Chan. He said with incredible surprise, "Tian Chan, is this elder heaven, from your family?" However, Tian Chan did not immediately explain to him. Instead, she looked at the will of heaven with surprise and joy and said happily, "Elder heaven, you finally recognize me?" The will of heaven sighed and looked at Tian Chan with a much gentler and kind gaze. He said, "I am not a cold-hearted person. You have been caring for me for so long. How could I not see it? Moreover, my ancestors did move here from the Heavenly Elixir sect in the secular world. It was just that I never told anyone else. The reason why I didn't recognize you before was because I was a useless person. There was no need to claim kinship with you. What's there to recognize a disgusting disabled person? But now, I have hope of recovery. Of course, I can recognize you. That's great. Chan was afraid that you would never recognize me. I have wanted to hear these words even in my dreams. Now, my wish has finally come true. Tian-chan was both wronged and happy as she shed tears. You silly child. The will of heaven was also touched. As the saying goes, a friend in need is a friend indeed. When he was at his lowest and most desperate, Tian-chan's concern was tantamount to sending charcoal in snowy weather. This was the true blood kinship that could not be cut off. The two finally recognized each other. However, Ho Guanqi and the others on the side were confused. Instead, Lin Yi heard some of the story from the Will of Heaven's words and asked, Xiao Chan, is Elder Heaven of the same lineage as the Tian clan in the secular world? Chapter 4107. Immediately, Tian-chan blushed and introduced to the Will of Heaven, Don't be angry, Tian-chan, and he were all ready. Without finishing her words, the Will of Heaven naturally understood what Tian-chan meant, and he was stunned. Ah. You actually have this kind of relationship with Tian-chan, and you came up from the secular world together. Lin Yi was also surprised. I didn't expect that Tian-chan is actually a relative of Tian-chan. After the misunderstanding was solved, the Will of Heaven immediately dispersed his aura. Looking at Lin Yi's young face, he sighed. It's really true that the new generation excels the old. Lin Yi, your medical skills are already so brilliant at such a young age. It's really incredible. If I'm not wrong, you can actually cure me completely, but out of caution, you held back just now, right? As soon as these words came out, Ho Guanqi and others were even more surprised. In their opinion, it was already very amazing that Lin Yi could cure the Will of Heaven's right arm, but he still held back. Under the gaze of everyone, Lin Yi couldn't lie, so he had to nod awkwardly. If he had known that the Will of Heaven was Tian-chan's relative, he wouldn't have held back so deliberately. Seeing this, everyone was even more shocked. Even Tianqing himself felt that it was unbelievable. He was just testing the waters. In theory, if Lin Yi could help him heal the meridians in his right arm, then naturally, he could heal the meridians in other parts of his body. But theory was theory. To actually achieve it, it was as difficult as ascending to the heavens. Without saying much, Lin Yi immediately began to heal the Will of Heaven again. After all, he was already on the same side, so he didn't have to worry too much, and there was no need to hide so much. This time, Lin Yi didn't hold back anymore. It lasted for a full 8 hours, and it was not until the sky was almost dark that he finally succeeded. Feeling the new meridians in his body, the Will of Heaven was so shocked that he could not move. The spiritual chi of heaven and earth that he had instantly absorbed was transformed into genuine chi that flowed through his meridians. This kind of familiar feeling that he had not felt for a long time simply made him, a former legendary master, unable to extricate himself. Ho Guanqi and Kai Zhongyang were shocked speechless. Even his master, Zhang Liju, didn't have this kind of heaven-defying ability. Seniors, could I trouble you to examine Elder Tian and see if there are any hidden dangers in his body? Lin Yi asked. It wasn't that he was being humble, although it seemed like there was no problem anymore. However, with Elder Celestial's previous level of strength, there might still be some undetectable side effects. Ho Guanqi and Kai Zhongyang were both medical masters with great experience, so they were suitable to help with the follow-up examination. Okay, Ho Guanqi and Kai Zhongyang nodded. They were curious, and this kind of thing was something they couldn't refuse. While the two were giving the will of heaven a full examination, Lin Yi stood on the side and chatted with Tian Chan. He carefully learned about everything that had happened to Tian Chan recently. The result made Lin Yi both happy and annoyed. The happy thing was, although Tian Chan was forced into a ghost marriage, she didn't suffer any actual harm. Instead, she had an extra layer of protection. What annoyed him was that Jing Dongjue and Jing Tianchu were simply looking for death. Especially Jing Tianchu. This scum was obviously trying to get his hands on Tian Chan, and this was intolerable. He had to find a chance in the future to nip this threat in the bud. While they were talking, Ho Guanqi and Kai Zhongyang had finished the examination of the will of heaven, and they exclaimed, "My friend Lin Yi, your medical skills are really amazing. The meridians in Elder Celestial's body are no different from those of ordinary people. It's just that he was injured for a long time, and his body is still not used to it. As long as he has a good rest for a while, he should be able to recover." "That's good. I was afraid that there would be some side effects." Lin Yi nodded and smiled. Ho Guanqi looked up at the sky outside, and said to the will of heaven and Lin Yi, "Elder Celestial, it's getting late. Junior brother Kai and I have to go back to discuss the auction in Zhongdao, so we won't stay here for long. We'll see you tomorrow." Then, "Sean, I will go back first. Elder Celestial, have a good rest." Tian Chan also said. After all, she was the daughter-in-law of the Jing family, so she couldn't spend the night outside. "Okay, then I won't see you out." The will of heaven nodded, and then turned to Lin Yi and said, "Anyway, I live alone. How about you stay here for one night, Lin Yi, and chat with me?" Lin Yi was stunned. Since Ho Guanqi and Kai Zhongyang still had business to discuss and didn't have time to arrange for him, he might as well stay here for one night. He immediately agreed and said, "Okay, then I'll bother you." Tian Xing laughed and said, "You are my great benefactor who has given me a new lease of life. To be willing to accompany an old man like me for a while is something I can't even beg for. What's there to be bothered about?" Everyone looked at each other and smiled. Lin Yi sent them out on behalf of the will of heaven. Before leaving, Tian Chan reluctantly hugged Lin Yi in his arms for a long time, and then they separated, saying that they would meet again the next morning. Back in the room, Lin Yi and the will of heaven sat opposite each other and chatted like old friends. Although the will of heaven had just recovered from his serious injury, he was in a good mood and was in the mood to talk. After so many years of illness, he was suddenly cured, and it was the time to share the joy. "Elder Celestial, please forgive me for being curious, but how did you get this injury? It's really rare to see your meridians damaged to this extent." Lin Yi asked. Hearing this, the will of heaven sighed and said, "You must have heard about the creation battle art. My meridians were damaged because I cultivated this creation battle art." Creation battle art. Lin Yi was shocked when he heard this. Listening to the will of heaven's words, could it be that the rumor was true, that cultivating the creation battle art would really make one useless? One should know that what he was cultivating now was the creation battle art. It was just that he had modified it with the art of dragon mastery as the basis. Yes, the creation battle art is a cultivation method passed down from ancient times, but for most people, it's a set of useless cultivation methods that can't be cultivated at all. No one will take it seriously, and no one will cultivate this creation battle art that has become a laughing stock. Except for people like me who come from a tribe of cultivators, there's no other choice. The will of heaven's face had a look of reminiscence and regret as he spoke. Lin Yi was slightly stunned. He had never heard of this legendary figure. The will of heaven was actually a grassroots cultivator. Chapter 4108. His words were flat, but Lin Yi couldn't help but feel a chill in his heart. There were very few people who could do this even though they knew it was impossible. It could only be said that there was a reason why Tianqing was able to become a legend of his generation. Gradually, I found that although the progress of the creation battle art was slow, my strength was extremely strong. I was invincible at the same level and could even kill opponents at a higher level. When I broke through to the nascent soul stage, I was recognized as the strongest nascent soul stage master on Heavenly Island. Because I had the strength to kill opponents at a higher level, I finally became the Vice Island Master of Middle Island. For a time, I was very famous. The Will of Heaven narrated without joy or sorrow. Since the creation battle art is so powerful, then. Elder Heaven, how did you end up like this? Lin Yi couldn't help but ask curiously. The Will of Heaven shook his head. Although I had become the strongest nascent soul stage master at that time, there was still a higher stage above the nascent soul stage. Of course, I was not willing to stop like this. However, when I was ready to break through to the nascent soul stage, I found that I couldn't cultivate anymore. At the nascent soul stage, besides me, no one else practiced the creation battle art, so there was no precedent to follow. I could only rely on my own strength to break through, but in the process of breaking through, my meridians were all broken. After listening to this, Lin Yi suddenly broke out in a cold sweat. He was also practicing the creation battle art, and it was the same experience as the Will of Heaven. He could kill opponents at a higher level easily and happily. According to what the Will of Heaven said, when he broke through to the nascent soul stage, he would also end up like this. Although he was still far from the nascent soul stage, let alone breaking through, if he continued to develop like this. It was only a matter of time. After not hearing Lin Yi's response for a long time, the Will of Heaven suddenly saw his frightened expression dripping with cold sweat. He couldn't help but feel strange. What's wrong? Are you not feeling well? That's not it. It's just that after listening to Elder Heaven's words, I felt something in my heart. Lin Yi smiled bitterly and shook his head. Feeling something. The Will of Heaven was stunned. Suddenly, his body shuddered and he turned pale with fright. Don't tell me you also cultivate a creation battle art. To tell you the truth, that is indeed the case. Lin Yi nodded frankly and didn't hide anything, even though it was the first time he came into contact with the Will of Heaven. But with the relationship of Tian Chan in front of him, he could be considered half one of them. What's more, he didn't have much confidence right now. He needed to learn more about the creation battle art from the Will of Heaven so that he wouldn't follow in his footsteps. After all, even if the Will of Heaven's meridians were shattered, he could still save him. However, if something were to happen to him, he could only sit there and wait for death. The Will of Heaven gasped and quickly said, "Then please stop. We are all cultivating in the wrong way." Wrong? Why? Lin Yi was stunned. After listening to the words just now, he only felt that this cultivation method was risky, but it shouldn't be completely wrong. Otherwise, whether it was the Will of Heaven or himself, they were all invincible at the same level. They were all invincible existences of the same level and could even kill those of a higher level. How was this possible? The Will of Heaven carefully looked at Lin Yi from head to toe again before he slowly said, "Let me ask you first. What is the heavenly Tao? Isn't it the pursuit of a higher realm? Above the heaven stage is the foundation establishment, after the foundation establishment is the gold core, and even the higher realm after that is the heavenly Tao." Lin Yi answered without hesitation. The Will of Heaven shook his head and said, "No, the real heavenly Tao is cultivation. Go against the heaven and finally achieve the great Tao. This is the real heavenly Tao." Yes, isn't this what we have been cultivating in pursuit of? Lin Yi asked curiously. When he first came to Heaven Stage Island, he had heard people mention the word cultivation. At that time, he didn't pay much attention to it. He thought it was just a new way of saying it after reaching the new realm of foundation establishment. No, no, no. What we are cultivating now is not the heavenly Tao. At best, it can only be called a pseudo-heavenly Tao. Its essence is to replace the heavenly Tao with martial arts. Although there are also foundation establishment, gold core, nascent soul, and other realms, they are not real cultivation. They can only be regarded as martial arts cultivation, a way to replace the heavenly Tao. The will of heaven shook his head repeatedly. Martial arts cultivation. Heavenly Tao cultivation. What does that mean? Lin Yi couldn't help but be confused. In the past, he had to rely on himself to figure it out. This was the first time he heard someone talk about these things seriously. Don't you understand? In order to let more people set foot on the heavenly Tao, as early as the ancient times, there were great predecessors of Heaven Stage Island who changed the heavenly Tao cultivation method into a lower threshold of martial arts cultivation. Although martial arts cultivation can obtain a stronger body and better skills, in the end, it is still a pseudo-heavenly Tao. The strength of martial arts cultivators will be very strong in the early stage, but later on, they will be much weaker than the real cultivators, and there is a huge essential difference between them. The will of heaven patiently explained. Elder Heaven, what is the essential difference that you are referring to? Lin Yi couldn't help but ask. It's very simple. Martial arts cultivation, the final strength obtained is martial arts, while heavenly Tao cultivation, the final strength obtained is divine sense. The will of heaven had a fascinated look on his face. So that's how it is. It was only then that Lin Yi finally understood. His brain felt as if it was filled with wisdom. Tianqing's guidance made his originally blurry understanding clear immediately. However, Lin Yi was still a little puzzled. Even if there was a difference between martial arts cultivation and heavenly Tao cultivation, almost everyone walked the path of martial arts cultivation, but he had never heard of anyone who was a real cultivator. In other words, the real heavenly Tao cultivation almost didn't exist anymore. The will of heaven's sudden mention of this was a little inexplicable. Tianqing saw through Lin Yi's confusion and said solemnly, I'm telling you all this because I want to tell you that the art of creation is a true practitioner's art. This is a legend passed down from the ancient times. It's not wrong, and it's not lying to us. It's just that not many people can practice it, and even if they do, they'll end up like me, practicing it wrong. Cultivating in the wrong direction. Lin Yi was stunned again, but combined with the words just now, he could roughly understand something. Elder Heaven, do you mean that this is supposed to be a heavenly Tao cultivation art, but in the end, you used it as a martial arts cultivation art? Chapter 4109. Lin Yi could understand this. Anyone would be able to understand the meaning of these words. However, it was useless. Only by truly comprehending this point would one be able to defy the heavens and become a saint. Although I can still cultivate in my current state, and am far more powerful than ordinary people, every breakthrough is very dangerous. If I'm not careful, my meridians will break. Especially when I broke through to the nascent soul stage last time, my meridians were all broken. The will of heaven said with lingering fear. Lin Yi was stunned. He had also cultivated the creation battle art, but he had never encountered this problem. Could it be because of the art of dragon mastery? This creation battle art originally had a flaw, but the art of dragon mastery was an all-purpose mantra. Therefore, when the two were combined and he modified it, the original flaw disappeared. Thinking about it, it was indeed possible, but judging from Tianqing's words, Lin Yi understood that this was probably a method that had no other way. The true way to train in the art of creation wasn't like what he was doing now. The art of dragon mastery only allowed him to train it, and to a certain extent, it acted as a substitute. That was all. However, after understanding this, Lin Yi wasn't too worried, nor was he in a hurry to figure out the true cultivation method of the art of dragon mastery. After all, no matter how good the art of dragon mastery was, it was still an additional cultivation method. The art of dragon mastery was Lin Yi's true foundation. Since he could cultivate it now, he could just take it one step at a time. Why bother worrying so much? As for Tianqing, Lin Yi didn't plan on giving him the arts he'd modified with the art of dragon mastery. After all, they'd only met for a day, and even with Tian Chan, even so, it wasn't to the point where they could exchange their lives for each other's. Let's wait and see for now. Lin Yi, when you broke through to the Foundation Establishment realm from Heaven Rank Great Circle, did you encounter any danger like I did? The Will of Heaven asked with concern. Lin Yi shook his head. That's not true. At that time, it felt quite smooth. It wasn't as dangerous as the meridians you mentioned just now. That's strange. Back then, I was in grave danger. The Will of Heaven looked at Lin Yi in surprise, and then said thoughtfully, but even if it's the same mental cultivation method, it varies from person to person. Or maybe it's because the level of Heaven stage Great Perfection is too low. When you break through from the Foundation Establishment realm to the Golden Core realm, you may feel a certain amount of pain. Maybe. Lin Yi responded noncommittally. The creation battle art that he cultivated and the original version of the Will of Heaven were two different things. The experience of the Will of Heaven might not happen to him. What would happen would only be known when the time came. The pain is not the most important thing. You can grit your teeth and endure it. The biggest problem is that it's very likely to be like me. Every time I break through, my meridians can't bear the huge impact of true qi and explode. That's really fatal. You must take it as a warning. Be mentally prepared in advance. The Will of Heaven warned. Lin Yi nodded and didn't say anything else. Seeing him like this, the Will of Heaven knew that he couldn't persuade him. He didn't continue to persuade him. For cultivators, strength was more important than life. Even if they knew that it was dangerous to continue to cultivate, very few people would stop halfway. Back then, Tianqing himself was like this. Even when others advised him not to practice. When others advised him not to practice, he insisted on practicing. Although his strength had not fully recovered, at least there was hope. Now that there was hope, his first thought was to cultivate. Even he, who had encountered such a big setback, was like this, let alone Lin Yi. Since he couldn't persuade Lin Yi, the Will of Heaven simply told Lin Yi about his cultivation experience over the years, bit by bit. He tried to let Lin Yi have a reference in the future cultivation process so that even if he encountered danger, he could be prepared. Cultivation experience, especially the cultivation experience of a legendary master like the Will of Heaven, was a real priceless treasure no matter where it was. It was a good thing that couldn't be bought with spirit jades. The Will of Heaven was so generous to share it with Lin Yi. It was also a disguised form of repayment. After all, Lin Yi was a great benefactor who was like a second parent to him. Of course, the relationship between Lin Yi and Tian Chan was also an important reason. Otherwise, the Will of Heaven would at most do something for Lin Yi in return, and it was impossible for him to teach so wholeheartedly. The two talked through the night until the sky was bright. They didn't feel tired at all. Instead, they talked even more excitedly. The Will of Heaven looked at the sky outside and suggested to Lin Yi, "Accompany me out for a walk. How about we continue to talk while walking? Speaking of which, I haven't walked out of this room for many years. I don't know if there are any changes outside now." Lin Yi smiled. "I wouldn't dare disobey." The two immediately went out side by side and walked in the courtyard of the pill hall. They talked and laughed and were full of interest. It immediately attracted the attention of many Pill Hall disciples. The Will of Heaven was a genuine legendary figure. It was impossible to see him normally. Moreover, they always knew that this person had become a useless person. They didn't expect him to actually go out and walk today. It seemed that he had completely recovered. The news that the former Deputy Island Master of Middle Island, the legendary figure the Will of Heaven had recovered spread like wildfire. Almost in a short period of time, it spread throughout the Pill Hall. Very soon, Lin Yi and Lin Yi saw Tian Chan, who rushed over after hearing the news. However, when they saw Jing Tianchu, who appeared behind Tian Chan, their expressions suddenly turned cold. This haunting asshole. Jing Tianchu looked at the Will of Heaven, who seemed to have been reborn, and couldn't help but say in disbelief, "You, Elder Heaven, you have recovered." At the same time he asked this, there was a sudden commotion around. The person who came this time was actually the person with the highest authority in the Pill Hall, the Deputy Hall Master of the Pill Hall, Jing Dongjue. The Will of Heaven glanced at Jing Tianchu and deliberately raised his voice. He said to everyone around him, "Tian Chan is my Tian family sister in the secular world. In the future, she will be the Will of Heaven's relative. Those who have ill intentions towards her, pay attention. Otherwise, if you really provoke my sister, I will definitely not be polite. I believe you have heard of my decisive deeds. Behave yourselves." Chapter 41:10. Tian Chan was surprised and happy at the moment. Although the Will of Heaven had acknowledged her yesterday, there was no clear relationship. But now, the Will of Heaven was her brother, a super backer that no one dared to belittle. Among the crowd, only Jing Tianchu's face was ashen. He was so angry that he gritted his teeth. Of course, he knew that the Will of Heaven's words were directed at him. This old man had just recovered from his injury and his strength was far from his peak. But with his genius cultivation, it was only a matter of time before he recovered his strength. In the face of the Will of Heaven at his peak, not to mention Jing Tianchu, even his grandfather Jing Dongjue would have to give way to him. Originally, with the gradual consolidation of his position as a young master, Jing Tianchu felt that it was a piece of cake to get his hands on Tian Chan, his beautiful sister-in-law. In the end, he didn't expect that the Will of Heaven's words would directly seal all hope. This old fart. But even so, Jing Tianchu didn't dare to bear a grudge against the Will of Heaven. It was useless even if he bore a grudge. If he really provoked the Will of Heaven, the Will of Heaven could kill him as easily as crushing an ant. The only person he could bear a grudge against was Lin Yi, who cured the Will of Heaven. Noticing Jing Tianchu's resentful and cold eyes, Lin Yi smiled faintly. For him now, as long as Jing Tianchu didn't use any insidious means against Tian Chan, there was no substantial threat. His strength was far inferior to his dead cousin Jing Tianjie. How could this kind of trash fight with him? On the other side, Jing Dongjue, who had just arrived, looked at his grandson with a deep meaning. Recently, Jing Tianchu had been pestering Tian Chan. He had heard about it, but he didn't intend to stop it. Anyway, he let Tian Chan and Jing Tianjie have a ghost marriage. The purpose was just to take revenge on Tian Chan. Now, even if he let another grandson take advantage of it, it wouldn't be a big deal. However, in the past, it was just a matter of a few words. Now that the Will of Heaven had publicly announced that he would support Tian Chan, Jing Dongjue couldn't act rashly for the time being. After all, the legend of the Will of Heaven was still there. No matter what, Jing Dongjue had to weigh his options carefully. At the very least, he couldn't afford to fall out with a legendary figure like the Will of Heaven before he had a clear understanding of the Will of Heaven's strength. Thinking of this, Jing Dongjue immediately congratulated him with a face full of joy. old heaven, you've recovered from your injuries, just like a dragon returning to the sea or a tiger returning to the forest. It's just a matter of time before you regain your former glory. Congratulations. The will of heaven smiled and said, you flatter me, Vice Hall Master Zheng. Glory or not, it's all in the past. For me, everything is starting from the beginning. At this time, Ho Guanqi and Kai Zhongyang came from afar. Zheng Dongjue saw them and said, Little Ho, Celestial Elder's recovery is such a joyous occasion. Why don't you think of a way to tell Hall Master Zhang? These words were meant to test the waters. Zheng Dongjue had never been willing to be under anyone, but to ask him to go against Zhang Liju. He didn't even have the guts to do so, let alone the ability. The only chance he had was that Zhang Liju wasn't around all year round. But even so, he only dared to do some small things, afraid that Ho Guanqi's disciples had some secret way of contacting Zhang Liju. Otherwise, if Zhang Liju caught him in the act, he'd be done for. Ho Guanqi didn't say anything. He replied without missing a beat, Vice Hall Master Zheng, my Sifu is very secretive. It's not easy to find him, but I'll try my best to send a message. When he receives it, he'll come back naturally. Zheng Dongjue nodded and looked at Lin Yi. This must be Alchemist Lin, right? Since you've healed our Celestial Elder's injury, you're the savior of the Hall of Elixir. If you have any requests, we'll definitely do it. These words were very passionate, but Lin Yi could hear the perfunctory tone in it. He smiled faintly, if there's a need in the future, I won't hesitate to help. But I'm still a freelancer right now, and following Master Kai is already a rare opportunity for me to learn and train. Is that so? To be able to cure a terminal illness like Celestial Elders, that would be an earth-shattering news. Alchemist Lin, aren't you being too humble? Zheng Dongjue blinked his eyes and pretended to praise him. I wouldn't dare, I'm just speaking the truth. I sincerely want to learn from Master Kai, Lin Yi said faintly. Upon hearing this, Zheng Dongjue sized up Lin Yi once more. This guy looked very normal, and he was ridiculously young. From his tone, he didn't sound like a powerful alchemist at all. From what Zheng Dongjue could see, this Lin Yi just happened to have a special prescription for the will of heaven, and that's why he was able to cure it. If his medical skills were as good as Zhang Liju's, he would have been famous on the 5 Islands long ago. Why would he need to learn from Kai Zhongyang? He clearly wasn't some powerful character. After coming to this conclusion, Zheng Dongjue didn't care about Lin Yi anymore. He didn't care about this country bumpkin that popped out of nowhere. He said faintly, if that's the case, Lil Kai, please help me take care of this alchemist Lin. Take him to eat something to express your gratitude. I still have things to do, so I won't be accompanying you guys. The rest of you, don't you have to work? With that, Zheng Dongjue put his hands behind his back like a master and left with Zheng Tianchu. The rest of the disciples from the Hall of Elixir also left. This old bastard really knew how to act. Lin Yi and the Will of Heaven looked at each other, their eyes filled with mockery and mockery. After coming to Heaven Class Island for so long, Lin Yi had seen quite a few big shots. Whether it was Shanghai Tianhua in the north, or the Will of Heaven in front of him, their auras were all naturally admirable. Only this Vice Hall Master Zheng's aura was fake, and no matter where he went, he always looked like Kong Mingming. It really made people speechless. Since this master has spoken, Elder Heaven, Lin Yi, young friend, why don't we go out for a meal? Ho Guanqi teased with a smile. That's all right, I wanted to go out for a breather too. Let's go find a place outside. The Will of Heaven nodded with a smile. Then let's go to 5 Elements Commerce. There won't be too many people there, and we can talk without worry. Kai Zhongyang suggested. Chapter 41:11. Of course, Lin Yi and the others had no objection to this. They immediately prepared the car and went out together. On the other side, after Jing Dongjue took Jing Tianchu to a secluded place, he suddenly stopped and said in a dignified tone, "Chu, are you interested in Tianchan?" Jing Tianchu was shocked and his face instantly turned pale. Coveting his brother's sister-in-law was a serious crime. He quickly begged for mercy, "Grandpa, I know I was wrong. I was just momentarily blinded by greed. I won't dare to do it again." "Don't dare." "Why not? Since I chose you as my heir, everything will be yours in the future. She's just a woman. What's there to be afraid of?" Jing Dongjue changed his tone. "Ah. Grandpa, what do you mean?" Jing Tianchu was stunned. "Don't you understand? You are my grandson. Whether you have feelings for Tianchan or not, I won't stop you." Jing Dongjue patted him on the shoulder. Jing Tianchu was overjoyed. He didn't expect Jing Dongjue to have such an attitude. But after thinking about it carefully, in the cultivation world, strength was king. He was a big shot who would inherit the Jing family in the future. It seemed that it was not a big deal to covet Tianchan, however, don't provoke her in the near future. The will of heaven was a troublesome existence in Zhongdao. You can't act rashly until you know whether his strength has fully recovered. As for the matter of Tianchan, I will find a way to fulfill your wish. Do you understand? Jing Dongjue reminded him. Yes, I understand. I will listen to Grandpa's orders in the future. Jing Tianchu nodded repeatedly and was overjoyed. In a quiet private room in 5 Elements Commerce, Lin Yi and others sat at a table. Because there were no outsiders, Lin Yi could sit with Tianchan without worry. On the other side of him sat the will of heaven. Opposite them were Hou Guanqi and Kai Zhongyang. Lin Yi originally wanted to call Sydney over, but when he walked to the door, he found that Sydney was cultivating in seclusion, so he didn't want to disturb her. Anyway, these people were all here, so it was the same to introduce them later. When the dishes were ready, the will of heaven toasted Lin Yi first and said happily, "Brother Lin Yi, since you and my sister Tianchan are Dao companions, then I will call you brother." Lin Yi was shocked. He hurriedly said, "Elder Heaven, you're my senior, I'm not worthy. If I say you deserve it, then you deserve it." The will of heaven waved his hand and said, "You cured my terminal illness, and your kindness is like giving me a new life. Without you, I would still be a useless person. So, I'm your big brother now because of Tianchan." When Lin Yi heard this, he could only smile and nodded. He didn't say anything more. After all, in the world of cultivation, the strong were respected. Age was never important, strength and ability were the key. At this time, Kai Zhongyang also raised his glass and toasted Lin Yi. He pretended to complain and said with a smile, "Speaking of which, young hero Lin, you're really not kind at all. You have such brilliant medical skills, but you didn't tell us at all. You made us worry for nothing." "That's right, little friend Lin Yi, you really lied to us." Hou Guanqi also smiled and echoed. Lin Yi couldn't help but smile and said, "I already have medical skills. I already knew it when I was in the secular world. It's just that I didn't see Big Brother Heaven's injury before, so I didn't have the confidence. I only dared to try after seeing it. I didn't mean to hide it from the two of you." "Oh. Didn't you know that Brother Lin Yi's medical skills were profound? Then why did you find him to treat my injury?" The will of heaven was shocked. Kai Zhongyang and Hou Guanqi looked at each other and explained, "Elder Heaven, actually, young hero Lin's purpose of going to the pill hall this time was to see Tianchan. As for asking the medicine master to treat your injury, it was actually just an excuse. In the end, we didn't expect him to actually treat your injury. The will of heaven instantly laughed and patted Lin Yi's shoulder. This is fate. Come, for fate, let's cheers. They were all on the same side, so they gathered together to drink and chat. Naturally, they were in high spirits and happy. However, when they were about to finish eating, Lin Yi was a little worried and said that Jing Tianchu is plotting against Xiao Chan. I'm a little worried about letting Xiao Chan stay in the pill hall like this. It's okay. I'm here. Tian Chan is my sister. No matter how bold that kid is, he won't dare to do anything. The will of heaven immediately patted his chest and said, it's easy to dodge a spear in the open, but it's hard to guard against a stab in the dark. This guy is a sinister villain. With Big Brother Heaven here, he naturally won't dare to do anything, but I'm afraid that he will play some tricks. Lin Yi listened and shook his head. That's right. Jing Tianchu is a very wretched person. Before Jing Tianjie died, he didn't dare to be too arrogant, but he often did some wretched things. Now that he has Jing Dongjue's support, we still have to be careful. Ho Guanqi nodded in agreement. With that said, the will of heaven was in a difficult position. Although he could take care of Tian Chan, he couldn't watch her every moment. After all, his injuries had just healed, and he needed time to recover his strength. He couldn't keep showing his face outside. With your face, Big Brother Heaven, can you bring Xiao Chan out to establish her own sect? At least, can you let her not stay in the pill hole? Lin Yi suddenly asked. Now that Zhang Liju wasn't here, Jing Dongjue could do whatever he wanted in the pill hole. Even with the will of heaven's words to protect Tian Chan, the will of heaven wasn't a member of the pill hole. If Jing Dongjue really wanted to do something, an outsider like him might not be able to do anything. The best way was naturally to let Tian Chan leave the pill hall as soon as possible. As long as she could establish her own sect, Jing Dongjue wouldn't be able to do anything. If something really happened, the will of heaven could intervene without any hesitation. It shouldn't be a problem. Since Tian Chan is my sister, I'll bring her out. Even that old man Jing Dongjue wouldn't dare say anything. Lin Yi bro, just wait for my good news. The will of heaven thought about it and said. The will of heaven was a decisive man. After making up his mind, he brought Tian Chan back to the pill hole. After all, he was making the decision for Tian Chan. Even if the will of heaven came forward, Tian Chan herself would still have to go back and express her stance. This big brother of his was quite confident. Lin Yi sighed. If it was someone else, they would have to be mentally prepared and hesitate before dealing with Jing Dongjue, the vice head of the pill hole. Chapter 41:12. The will of heaven left with Tian Chan, while Ho Guanqi and Kai Zhongyang continued to go out to prepare for the auction in Zhongdao. Only Lin Yi turned around and went back to his room. Sensing Lin Yi's return, Sydney immediately stopped her cultivation and hurriedly greeted him. She asked with concern, "How is Tian Chan?" "Sydney, don't worry. Everything is going well." Lin Yi immediately smiled and told her what happened in the past 2 days. After listening to Tian Chan, Shueli was not jealous at all. Instead, she sincerely thought for Tian Chan and said, it would be great if Tian Chan could really move out of the alchemy department. With Jing Dongjue suppressing her from above and Jing Tianchu pestering her from below, the alchemy department has become a troublesome place for her. If she continues to stay there, she will get into trouble sooner or later. Yes, that's why I asked Brother Tian to talk about this. Lin Yi nodded in agreement. He looked up and down at Sydney and suddenly had an idea. If Tian Chan could really come out and start her own business, it would be a good choice to let her be with Sydney. After all, according to the previous consideration, it was actually a very troublesome thing to bring Sydney back to the North Island. Judging from Sydney's performance, she did not reject Tian Chan. The two women should be able to get along well. However, this was just a sudden idea. It was not mature yet, and he did not know how to operate it. Moreover, it was still unknown whether Tian Chan could successfully escape. At this stage, this idea could only be thought in his mind. Lin Yi did not say it out loud. However, what Lin Yi did not expect was that the will of heaven was extremely efficient. He had just talked to Sydney, and the sky was not even dark, and the will of heaven had already returned with Tian Chan. When the door opened, Tian Chan and Sydney happened to meet each other, and they suddenly sighed with emotion. Before this, the two of them were transmitted from the secular world to Zhongdao. Although they knew each other, they were not too familiar with each other, and there was no obvious intersection. But now, the two of them were together because of Lin Yi. When they met again, they had a kind of intimate feeling like sisters reuniting. Not to mention the experience of the two women in the secular world, after coming to Heaven Stage Island, it could be said to be full of ups and downs. One was forced in Alchemy Hole. The other was bullied and humiliated in Snow Sword Sect, and they were both in the same predicament. Because of their relationship with Lin Yi, the two women held hands and talked about their experiences on Heaven Stage Island together. They had a common language, and they quickly became closer to each other. In a short while, the two women already called each other sisters, and chatted happily. "Brother Lin Yi, you are really lucky. You enjoy the happiness of having two wives." Others are envious. The will of heaven looked at this scene and joked. Although he was Tian Chan's elder brother, Heaven Stage Island was not like the secular world. As long as one was strong, it was normal for him to have lovers all over the world. He would not be dissatisfied because Lin Yi had other women. On the contrary, in the opinion of him and Ho Guanqi, for a genius like Lin Yi, if he only had Tian Chan as his cultivation partner, it would be strange. That would be really strange. Whether it was Tian Chan or Sydney, they were both great beauties with unparalleled beauty. Lin Yi was able to make them give their hearts to him. This luck was indeed enviable. Even the will of heaven, a cultivation maniac who wholeheartedly pursued the heavenly law, could not help but sigh. What he did not know was that none of Lin Yi's other lovers were any less beautiful than the two women. When all the women were together in the future, they would be the true winners in life. It is indeed my luck to be able to meet them in this life. Lin Yi looked at this gratifying scene and nodded emotionally. He did not expect that the relationship between the two women would be so harmonious. However, he could guess that the two women were so close to each other. Although it was because of their congenial personalities, there was another reason, and that was because they cared about his feelings. After all, from Lin Yi's point of view, if the two women still quarreled with each other in the current situation, it would be a headache for him. But brother Lin Yi, I still have to spoil the mood by saying this. Although it is enviable to have multiple lovers, you should not only envy the lovebirds but not the fairies. Don't slack off in your cultivation. The will of heaven warned. The land of beauties was the grave of heroes. Throughout the ages, there were countless geniuses who had outstanding talents, but they wasted their time in the land of beauties and finally became ordinary. The will of heaven sincerely regarded Lin Yi as one of his own. He did not want to see such a tragedy happen to Lin Yi. Brother Heaven, don't worry. I am very clear that strength is king. If I am not strong enough, no matter how many beauties I have, I can't protect them. Therefore, for me, they are not obstacles on the path of cultivation. Instead, they are the motivation for me to continue to improve. Lin Yi said with a smile. Indeed. Femme fatale is not a lie. Although their unparalleled beauty is your fortune, they are just like that Jing Tianchu, always attracting all sorts of trouble. Only with great power can you truly protect them. Tianqing nodded. That's right. You're right. You're right. By the way, Brother Heaven, why are you so fast? Have you settled Jing Dongju aside? Lin Yi turned to ask. Of course. Jing Dongjue won't dare to say no. The will of heaven laughed out loud. Tian Xing laughed heartily. I've already seen through him. That guy is a classic example of someone who bullies the weak and fears the strong. If I had lowered my voice and discussed things with him, he might have taken advantage of me. But this time, when I went over and told him that Tian Chan is my sister and I'm going to take her out to start her own family, what do you think he did? What did he do? Lin Yi asked curiously. That old man was frightened by me on the spot. After holding it in for a long time, he finally said, since this is your family's matter, I will naturally leave it up to you to decide. Just thinking about that ugly, bitter face of his is hilarious. Tian Xing laughed loudly. That Deputy Hall Chief Xing, maybe he is temporarily not clear about your strength. He doesn't dare to openly offend you, the legendary Deputy Island Master of Middle Island. He is full of tricks, but he doesn't have the courage to openly offend you, so he can only give in. Lin Yi also smiled. Chapter 41:13. Xing Dongjue, this old man, has already lost his drive to improve. He can only stop here. There's no possibility for him to improve further. Even if I haven't recovered my strength, I don't need to care about trash like him. The will of heaven curled his lips and looked at him disdainfully. As he spoke, he still couldn't hide his arrogance and overbearingness from when he was dominating Heaven's Stage Island. But this kind of person can't do anything right. Even if he can't become a big problem, he's still a threat. Brother Tian, it's better for you to pay attention. Lin Yi reminded. Brother Lin Yi, don't worry. I know this. The will of heaven smiled indifferently. He turned to look at the two girls who were chatting intimately and asked, speaking of which, what do you plan to do with the two of them? Are you going to stay in Five Elements Commerce forever? Five Elements Commerce had Kai Zhongyang's protection. It wasn't impossible to continue staying here. However, the will of heaven could tell that living under someone else's roof wasn't Lin Yi's style. Moreover, Five Elements Commerce was still a part of Pill Hole. If that was the case, it would go against the original intention of letting Tian Chan establish her own sect. I'm also considering this. Brother Tian, do you have any good suggestions? Lin Yi asked. If you want to stay in Middle Island with them, there are only two choices. One is to join a sect, and the other is to establish your own sect. However, you don't even consider Pill Hole. I don't think you have any intention of joining a sect, right? The will of heaven asked. Of course. Tian Chan and Sydney were bullied and oppressed in their own sect. If they join another sect, it's hard to guarantee that it won't happen again. So, I can only choose the latter. Lin Yi nodded. If that's the case, Brother Lin Yi, you can consider starting a small business. Although it's hard for an ordinary person to establish a foothold in Middle Island, you have us as your backing. It's not like you don't have any background. If it's just a small business, it shouldn't be a problem to establish a foothold. The will of heaven suggested. That's fine. Hearing this, Lin Yi's eyes lit up. This way, not only would he be able to settle down the two girls, he would also be able to earn some spirit jades, killing two birds with one stone. Then, he rubbed his chin and pondered, but what kind of business should I start? The two most popular products on the Heaven Stage Island are elixirs and heavenly treasures. The latter is highly dependent on the source of goods, so it won't be easy to get on the right track in a short period of time. However, elixirs are definitely in short supply, and it just so happens that Tian-chan is an alchemist. If you need it, you can also purchase from Little Kai. I think it will be a good way to go. The will of heaven analyzed for him. The reason why the Middle Island Alchemy Hall could have such a high position today, and why the Five Elements Commerce could sit firmly on the throne of the Commerce Alliance's number one, in the end, it was all because of the great influence of pills. In the 5 great islands of the heaven rank, this was a hard currency that was even more reliable than spiritual jades. No matter who it was, no one would complain about having too many medicinal pills, especially high-quality medicinal pills. If that's the case, we can really open a shop that specializes in selling medicinal pills. The more Lin Yi thought about it, the more he felt that this was a good idea. If they really opened a shop, in fact, there was no need to look for Kai Zhongyang to purchase goods. Not only was Tian-chan an alchemist, he himself was also an alchemist, and in terms of quality, he was absolutely superb. At that time, he would let Tian-chan refine some common medicinal pills, and Lin Yi himself would specialize in refining some superb medicinal pills, which should be enough to meet the needs of the shop. Tian-chan and Sydney, who were on the side, heard Lin Yi and the will of heaven's words, came over and nodded in agreement. Okay, let's open an elixir shop together, this is a good idea. Since both of you agree, then it's decided. Lin Yi was not a sloppy person. Seeing the situation, he made a decision immediately, and then said, but if we want to open an elixir shop, the first thing we need to solve is the problem of the shop. The quality of the location of the shop often directly determined the popularity of the business. However, in this middle island, it was as difficult as ascending to heaven for ordinary people to get a shop in a good location. If one did not have a strong background and backing, it was purely wishful thinking. The shop is not a problem, I'll look for an old friend of mine for help, this is just a matter of a word. Brother Lin Yi, you just need to look for a good location first. The will of heaven patted his chest. He was the dignified deputy island master of the Middle Island. Even if he had been injured for so many years, his influence was still there, not to mention that his injuries had now healed. At this time, both Ho Guanqi and Kai Zhongyang came back from work. After hearing Lin Yi's plan to open an elixir shop, both of them expressed their approval. Young hero Lin, actually, you don't need to look for a location, I just happen to have a ready-made shop on hand, Kai Zhongyang suddenly said after listening. A ready-made shop. Lin Yi and the others were stunned, and said doubtfully, Senior Kai, you don't want me to open it here at 5 Elements Commerce, do you? How is that possible? With the influence of 5 Elements Commerce, it will be difficult for young hero Lin to attract any customers even if it is just on this street, not to mention here. Kai Zhongyang shook his head and laughed. 5 Elements Commerce had the backing of Middle Island Elixir Hall, and it was indisputably the #1 chamber of commerce just by relying on the elixir business. If Lin Yi really opened the elixir shop next to it, he was afraid that there would be no customers at all. Where is it then? Lin Yi asked. That shop is not too far from here, it is only 4 streets away. Although the location isn't very prosperous, it is still quite good. Kai Zhongyang explained, it was originally a weapon shop, but because of poor management, the owner can no longer make money. I have met him a few times, so I originally wanted to buy it and open a small medical shop, but I have been busy preparing for the auction recently, so I haven't had the time to care about it. Now, I can ask him to transfer it to you. Isn't this stealing someone's beauty? Lin Yi said hesitantly. Hey, young hero Lin, you worry too much. No matter what, this old man is still the deputy shopkeeper of the 5 Elements Chamber of Commerce. Opening a medical center is just a personal hobby. This idea is just a spur-of-the-moment idea. If I really do this, this old man will have to carefully consider whether or not people will gossip about me. Kai Zhongyang waved his hand and said with a smile, "You're tuning into the LoveLore Library YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure."